all checked in and ready to go. So with that, committee chair, the meeting is yours.
Thank you. This is Matt Clifford, a staff attorney with Trout Unlimited and a member of the full committee, and I have agreed to chair this subcommittee on enforcement. I just want to welcome everyone to the meeting this morning, and I assume that we will start by calling the roll. Someone correct me if that's, so please do.
Okay, Matt Clifford, you are here.
I
Kristen
am.
Evedall.
Here.
Helena Williams. Helena. David Woolsey. David.
Sorry, my mouse went to sleep on me.
Okay.
I'm here.
And Ben Wu.
Present.
Perfect. We'll try and for Helena Williams. Okay, we still have quorum, so I'll just check back with her a little later.
Great. So we do have a quorum. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'll start off with just a quick statement from the chair here, just by way of background. So looking forward to the work of this subcommittee. I've agreed to chair the subcommittee, and I'll just lay my cards on the table a bit here, frankly, because I just feel the obligation to contribute to the work of the advisory committee in general. And I think it's an important work that needs to be done. My own experience and substantive experience in the world of enforcement is a little bit different, I think, than a lot of the subject matter we'll be dealing with, particularly today and probably in the future as well. My own experience with this is more with I'm a water attorney, and so I deal with CDFW and the water board, et cetera, water use, et cetera, and know a bit about enforcement in that realm, but less about the kind of day-to-day licensing stuff that I think is the meat of what the committee will do. So I just want to be upfront about that and say I'll rely heavily on committee members. I know a lot of you are actively interested in and deal with these issues all the time, and I'm happy to lead discussions and contribute as I can, but I'll rely on folks to kind of put meat on the bones of discussions and help guide kind of the substance, because I want the output of the committee to be meaningful. And so anyway, I'm glad we're all here. And with that introductory statement, I guess we'll go ahead and get started on the agenda. We have 3 substantive items on the agenda today, which relate to the consolidation of the 3 licensing agencies. The first 2 have to do with there are 2 existing agency policies on how to classify different regulatory and statutory violations and levels of severity, and then how against licensed entities, and then how to the similar criteria for how to prioritize disciplinary action against those. So 2 of those will deal with those policies about vis-a-vis licensees, and the third one will be similar, but what the policy should be of the new consolidated agency with regard to non-licensed, unlicensed operators. So that's kind of the 2 broad buckets. And so with that general introduction, I'm going to suggest we go ahead and dive into agenda item 2, which is background for recommendations related to the disciplinary tiers of regulatory and statutory violations in the disciplinary guidelines. Currently, I'll just read the background here. Currently, the California Department of Food and Agriculture and the Bureau of Cannabis Control have disciplinary guidelines, which the committee's been provided. Y'all should have that in the meeting materials. The Bureau classifies violations under a Tier 1, least severe, Tier 2, more severe, and Tier 3, most severe system. CDFA classifies violations as being minor, moderate, and severe. The severity of a violation is determined by a number of factors, including, but not limited to, potential for harm, knowing or willful violations, and risk to public safety. The more severe violations typically result in a commensurate level of discipline. As the licensing authorities move towards consolidation, how should the penalties be tiered to establish a cohesive framework for disciplinary action? So that's agenda item 1. And with that background, I would open it up to the committee. Is there a discussion on agenda item 1? And I presume the goal here, if it helps us get started, is that we have two different sets of two ways to look at this from these. We have one from CDFA and one from the Bureau about how to analyze these, and presumably the new combined agency is going to want to have one set of policies to focus on, and so input from this committee on which approach, what the approach should be, what sorts of factors. I mean, the factors in the two are fairly similar, but what sorts of factors should be in the combined policy? Any thoughts from members on that to get us started?
Sorry, I'm looking. Are we raising hands, or are we just kind of opening discussions? Member Wu.
Yeah, and bear with me as I go. Let's go ahead with raised hands. I'll call on folks as we get raised hands. But go ahead. I mean, we'll consider your hand raised.
I think as in general, right? You already mentioned the fact that they're consolidating the rules. I think that's going to be critical. Just making sure that we have a unified, easy to understand rule set where there's no contradiction. Certainly is important. One of the main things kind of going through my head, and I think maybe this is more of a technical question, but when they talk about violations, how are they going? How is that looked at? And I'm not sure. Like every, for example, if a licensee sold to an unlicensed person and sold to them for every day for 100 days, do you would we look at that as 100 violations, or are we looking at that as one violation? And I'm thinking about this from the perspective of fines and whether or not what's appropriate.
Gotcha. And I should, as a matter of housekeeping, remind folks that you should probably identify yourself. That was Member Wu, right? So we should identify ourselves to be a good chairman here. I think that's addressed towards the end. I remember language towards the bottom at the CDFA order anyway, where there's a calculation. Council can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a calculation based on the number of days of the size of a fine that includes the number of days the violation occurs. I think I read that at the bottom. I'm trying to pull it up here.
Yeah, you're correct. This is Sarah Gardner, counsel for the Bureau. For the bureaus, there's a fine formula that will calculate the number of violations and stuff. We also have it divided by tiers, and then you'll see in CDFAs, they have a range, but each violation, like as Committee Member Wu asked, that could be 100 violations. So each day that they commit a violation, that would be a new violation. That makes sense.
Got it. And so when you say range, I guess that's part I'm kind of zeroing in on, which is, just want to make sure that, in one situation, it seems like it's formulaic. Another one, you still have a range.
Right. That's kind of the main difference. So we each have 3 tiers that we go by, whether it's tier 1, 2, or 3, or like, I think they go with more severe, most severe. And then there's that range. So if it's like a tier 3, that's going to be more severe, and there's a higher range of fines. And you can see, like in CDFAs, they have a set range. The Bureau does a formula.
Okay. I would say just, my final thought here is with respect to, fines and penalties, I just want to recognize that, people who have gone through all the headache of having licenses and paying, high taxes and all this type of stuff is, we really should, disincentivize, the non-licensed activity out there as much as possible, right? So for me personally, I just want to make sure that the penalties are severe enough to dissuade people from engaging in illegal behavior. So that's all. That's my main point.
Thanks. And I'm thinking that last point is probably most relevant to our third. It's item 4 on the agenda, but the one of like, what should the policies be against non-licensed, right? And so.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, that's fine. No, I think that's an important consideration. But just for clarification, so there's, like I say, these first 2 agenda items we're talking about, for folks who are licensed, they're holding licenses, they're operating, there's a zillion, as you can see from these violations they can commit for different, of the Code of Regulations or the Business and Professions Code. And so these 2 documents basically categorize those offenses into different levels of what's considered more and less severe. according to some criteria about, having to do with public safety and a number of other factors. And so to try to get some, it appears to me, some kind of objective sense of what's a more and less serious offense, and then what level of penalty, obviously a higher penalty range is attached to the more serious offenses. None of these are absolute limits, as I understand it, because those are set by statute, but this is intended to give some guidance to the agencies about the level of fine to be imposed. And so I guess my own question following up, hang on, I've got one window open and a zillion, one screen and a zillion windows, so bear with me. I don't see any other hands up at the moment, but a couple things that I used to see in these.
Matt, I'm just going to jump
Yes.
in. Kristen Neville's hand is up.
Thank you for that. I'm not looking at everyone. I appreciate the help. Kristen, please go ahead.
Thank you, Member Burden. And if you would like to finish your comments, I'm totally fine waiting.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'll make a general comment then, just in reading these things, is that a couple of things strike me as, well, I have a question, first of all, is that the offenses, well, I'll comment first. It looks to me like there's a fair amount of discretion built into this. In other words, there are ranges within each of these. You have some offenses that are considered more severe than other offenses according to these various criteria that are set forward. But within that, there's a lot of overlap. So a particular violation, I assume that the bureau, the agencies still have discretion to rank a particular violation as more or less severe, given on the facts of the incident. And so there's a lot of overlap in the penalties that can apply, even if you're in a higher. If the offense that's been committed is in a higher range, you still could end up with a lower penalty than a violation of a statute of a provision that was considered less severe in general, but had a particularly high level of, based on the facts of that case. I don't know if that's making sense, but I'm curious. Do I have that right? But I guess that's for counsel, if you can answer.
Yes, Matt,
That
you
makes
are
sense.
correct.
So there's a fair amount of discretion built into these. I just want to note that in general. I mean, so that's what we're dealing with here. And then, secondly, my more specific question, I think I have this right, is that the offenses themselves, these tier 1, 2, and 3, for example, in the Bureau's guidelines, there's no overlap there, right? A code section is either in tier 1 or tier 2 or tier 3, but not in more than one, right?
Not necessarily. It can depend. I won't say in every circumstance they're only under one tier. If a section is broad enough, there might be, it could be potentially that they would fall under that, and the same for CDFAs. Sometimes it could depend on how many violations have occurred to reach a different tier level too. So there is flexibility. They could be fit into multiple categories.
And would I be right that there's further a lot of flexibility in determining how many counts that an entity would be charged with? The number of, potentially a lot of these, the number of each day that it occurs is a violation. But is there any policy or any requirements in determining how many counts are charged?
I think, yes, there would always be that flexibility, and we would have the determination on whether or not to take disciplinary action on a violation. And there is that flexibility. We have the flexibility to lower fines or raise fines as per settlement discussions too. So there is a lot of flexibility in those.
Okay, just a general. Thanks for that. Kristen, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. Member Neville here. So just a couple of questions about, I'm looking at the fine charts, and so I'm referencing page 11 of 16 of the materials that were put forward. And it looks to me like the Bureau's formula has a tiered minimum fine to maximum fine schedule that is proportionate or in relationship to the size of license the applicant or the licensee holds. Those fines range, like just for testing labs, at the smallest type of business, if I'm reading this right, from about $1,500 to $6,000 for the smallest business, And then for the largest testing lab, for example, might range from $56,000 to $224,000. Am I understanding, am I reading this correctly and understanding the materials correctly?
Yes, you are reading it correctly.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Whereas Cannabis has a minor violation type range that is not based on size of cultivation or the size of cultivation license. It is based on the violation type. So a minor, excuse me, fine ranges from $100 to $500. A moderate is $501 to $1,000. And a serious fine is $1,001 to $5,000. And granted, you might have under, Cannabis, a number of violations, anywhere from the minor to moderate to serious range, that could be combined into a fairly sizable sum of fines. One of my questions here, if we're talking about what fines might look like for violations going forward, I'm not convinced or sure at this point that a one-size-fits-all would make sense. I mean, arguably, Cannabis's and the cultivation licenses are not structured in a manner that equates with gross revenue of those farms. So, and then we aren't into say even like a type 5 scenario. So we have this structure under Cannabis where the licenses are based, the license cost is based on an assumption that you will cultivate the maximum square footage allowed for your cultivation license, and that you will achieve a specified number of harvests, which oftentimes isn't the case in both of those situations. So you might have someone with a small license that allows for 10,000 square feet of cultivation, and it's an ML1, and so they're expected to achieve 3 harvests. That gets 1.7 harvests and only has 7,000 square feet of cultivation. So I'm not sure that there's a way to necessarily structure fines for cultivation in a manner that would be analogous to how the Bureau has structured fines here. And I also, you know, and then we have the license stacking. So I'm not sure how we would apples to apples this at this time. And so while I can appreciate the desire to have streamlined, consistent fines, I don't know how we would move Cannabis into a Bureau type model, so to speak. If anything, it might be easier to move the Bureau into a Cannabis type model. But I just wanted to make sure I was understanding things correctly here, and then just see if there were any insights on those comments, just to make sure that I'm understanding the materials properly.
Thanks for that, Member Nevadal. This question, so if just to understand your summation at the end there, so we have 2 documents. We have are you saying you're questioning whether or not you can really have one unified set of criteria for the, you know, the offenses identified in the Cannabis document right now versus the Bureau document? But if we were to try to do it, which of these 2 documents do you think is the better model for a combined one, the CDFA one or the other one?
I think probably, this is Member Neville again, I think probably the CDFA one. I mean, it's a little bit easier, I think, to have a uniform system that sets a minor violation, and the rate of that minor violation is $100 to $500, right? You set a rate for a moderate violation or a tier 2 violation, it's $501 to $1,000, right? And then the serious violation is a range of $1,001 to $5,000. And arguably any licensee could be dinged with a multitude of minor, moderate, and serious violations. And then I'm pretty sure that within the Cannabis framework, depending on how many offenses you have and or if your minors are repeat offenses, it can be elevated into a moderate or a serious violation offense. that seems like it seems like an easier system to spread across all license types than what the Bureau has put into place, which is based on your gross revenue. So your license types under the Bureau are based on gross revenue. And so you're estimating gross revenue on an annual basis, and then your fine scale and the formula for the tiers is based on that gross revenue you've declared. And cannabis cultivation licenses, the nursery licenses, the processing licenses are not based on gross revenue. They're based on this estimate of what you're going to cultivate. And it's not how much, it's the square footage and the number of harvests. So I don't know how we would apply a gross revenue formula to any type of cultivation unless we completely 100% restructured the cultivation license types themselves.
So it sounds like it's this is the chair again, particularly the gross revenue factor that is a sticking point that you're identifying.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be
Not as-
applicable to cultivation. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. I'm going to ask for the help of the moderator. I'm not convinced that I can see hands raised on my screen. I don't see any hands raised now, but I didn't see Kristen, so I want to please feel free to tell me if there are other hands up.
This is the moderator, Chair Clifford. I'm not sure if you have your participant panel open, but if you click on that, you'll see a panel of all of the members currently participating, and you'll be able to see the hand raised there.
Thank you very much. And just
You're so welcome.
it's a year into COVID. I'm on 3 different advisory committees, and they all use different software, not to mention 3 that we use for Zoom. Thank you, David. So it looks like David, Member Woolsey, you've got your hand up. So please go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to make one comment that the advantage of the Bureau's schedule is it allows for disciplinary action on a smaller business that so that business doesn't get fined out of existence. If the fine is say $5,000 as a flat table, not as a comparison to the size of the business, a small operator might not be able to afford that, and they get fined out of business for the same violation as a multi-million-dollar corporation that can be like, oh, I can pay $5,000. That's just the cost of doing business to me. So there are particular advantages to the BCC's approach when they look at fines based on business size, and I kind of agree with that approach. But I also, understand that the cultivation, if the formula is based on, certain assumptions, I don't see why a formula type structure can't be devised when the licensing authorities consolidate, so that in the cultivation space, you have these cultivation potential violations, and this is the formula based on either the size that you're actually cultivating or the size of your potential cultivation, because the other risk is you have people who cultivate more, but then they maybe report a smaller size so that they could potentially get a smaller fine. And I'm sure that that's the exception and not the rule. People are trying to be honest if they have licenses, but that's one of the problems with having just a standard fine that doesn't scale with the size of the business. Is you could have a small operator not be able to afford the fine and really go broke trying to pay the fine, whereas the exact same violation across the street at the multi-million-dollar corporation, they just write off the fine as a cost of doing business, and that could be a potential problem for small operators.
Thank you. Member Nevedal?
Yeah, Member Nevedal here, and I really appreciate those comments, Member Woolsey. I agree with you. I think one of the things that's challenging is that we have this license stacking. And I don't think it's an unsurmountable challenge, to be honest with you, to create a formula, but I do think any formula, if the Department of Cannabis Control chose to stick with a Bureau type formula going forward, it would have to take into consideration all licenses held by that licensee on that parcel, say, right? Because right now we have a lot of folks that have one medium license and then, however many small licenses stacked on top of that. And if they had violations in, say, 3 of their small licenses, it would be under a bureau formula, just, apples to apples, so to speak. They would have 3 small violations as opposed to a consideration of their stacked square footage and, the capacity of that overall facility with all of those licenses taken into consideration. I don't know like legally what the challenges would be to assessing a fine of that took place on a small license for a licensee that holds 50 small licenses and 1 medium license at that location, right? So I don't know that I don't know how that would be managed or if it is manageable under today's structure.
Oh, go ahead, Member Wu. I think you have your hand raised.
Hi, thank you. Member Wu speaking. Could this potentially be just a more general question for us to consider is, how much discretion do we want to allow regulators in applying fines? On one hand, the argument is, hey, we want a very structured, formulaic-driven one where you don't have a lot of bandwidth to go above and below. And the other one is, hey, we want to give people the ability to, weigh all the facts and look at all the licenses and sub-licenses and make a determination and look at, prior history. And ultimately, it seems like this is kind of the heart of this matter, right? Or is it not?
Well, this is Member Clifford, and I think that is one key element, but I think the answer is going to be that there's a very, in line with my initial observations, there's going to be a fair amount of discretion just by the nature of the beast here, as far as I can tell. And within that discretion, I think another key question is just what do we want the factors to, or what do we think the factors should be to guide that? To give the agencies something to justify a level of penalties in particular cases. And it seems to me that if I understand the issue right that we're talking about here, some sort of, you can look at the BCC criteria, the guidelines on PDF page 4, where they got a list of 12 factors to be considered. You can see where the size or profitability of the operation, you'd want something in there, and whether maybe that's different for a cultivation situation than it is for other types, where it's easier to calculate revenue, et cetera. If I'm understanding this right, I can see they're wanting to be something appropriate to the license type, to have that as one of the factors that are considered to help guide that discretion. And maybe it's a question of what that looks like in the different contexts, and maybe I don't know. Those are thoughts I have. But I would think we might want to take a look at this list of 12 factors and kind of go over them and see what do we think of. Some of them are probably no-brainers, right? Things they'd want to have in there regardless. But what are other ones we might have opinions on about? Do we really want this to be emphasized? And are there additional ones that we think should go in there? I don't know if that's helpful, but that's what occurs to me. Member Nevedal, is there? Oh, go ahead, Member Woolsey, please.
Thank you. This is Member Woolsey, and I guess one question I have is there something that's fundamentally broken with the fine system that they're using right now? And when they consolidate, if they just merge the fine tables from the different licensing authorities, I don't know if there's any information about if these fines have not been found to be effective, meaning when a licensee has been fined, if they repeat the violation over and over again, then the fine isn't very effective. But if they don't have repeat violations, then it is, right? So I don't know if anybody can get that information, but if there's not something fundamentally broken with the system they're using now, I don't see why a recommendation couldn't be made to just merge the system as it is. But if there is something fundamentally wrong, then by all means, please point it out.
That seems like a fair question to me. And I guess I have similar questions, what the experience has been with these. And I guess one thing we could do at some point here is go to public comment and see if we can get, hear experience that way. I'll give a second to see if anyone else from the committee wants to weigh in. Oh, Member Wu.
I was just going to say, whether it's public comment or Kristen Nevedal, I mean, I certainly think that from a business perspective, you're closest to living this, and I'd love to, kind of get your thoughts or other people's thoughts, or, even anecdotal thoughts, to say, what do we think needs improvement, right? I think the purpose of this is really as consolidation happens, and what recommendations do we want to give to improve the process? I think that's really what we want to do here, right?
I think that's right. And I think we, for Member Nevedal or anyone else who can provide that perspective on experience with the application of these criteria, I think that's what would really be helpful.
This is Member Nevedal, and I can't say that I have a lot of experience with these fines and their applicability. I do also think that we've been in a situation where we've had a high rate of provisional licenses. And then in the onboarding years of new businesses, I think the licensing authorities have exercised a lot of warnings. And so I would love to hear from the public. I think they could probably provide us with better information than I can at this time.
Thank you. I think we should hear from the public as well. I'd like to open it up. If I'm reading there's 60 attendees out there in the audience. I'm trying to just think in terms of housekeeping, how much time to allow for each comment. And remember, Nevedal, I might lean on you for a minute here because I think you have the most recent experience because you chair the other subcommittee. And I think you gave 3 minutes for comment to each commenter. And I'm just curious how well that worked, if you have any advice for me.
We did. This is Member Nevedal. We provided 3 minutes for public comment. We had very robust discussion. We had closer to 100 participants.
Okay.
Yes, that's what we did.
Thank you. And my reason for asking is I just want to ensure that we give everyone time because we do have, I imagine we're going to have robust discussion as well here. At least I hope we will. I want to make sure that we're being fair to everyone and giving everyone time to weigh in. And also that we get to our other agenda items. So at this point, I guess I'd like to throw it open to public comment. I'd recommend we try 3 minutes of comment per speaker. And I think if the facilitator would like to take it from here.
Yes, this is the moderator. Before I open to public comment, I do want to ask, would you be willing to accept more than one comment per agenda item? Or are we limiting it to one comment per agenda item?
I think as an initial matter, I think we'd like to, let's limit it to one per, in other words, we'll hear from each speaker once, if I understand you correctly.
Yes,
That's what I'd like to do. Yes, let's start, let's hear from each speaker once.
Sounds great.
I'd like to get.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened the Q&A panel. If you would like to request public comment, please click on the icon, which is the question mark within the square located in the lower right-hand portion of your screen, and type, "I would like to make a comment." All comments will be addressed in the order they are received. All other means of indicating you would like to make a public comment, such as hand raise or asking questions in the Q&A panel, will not be addressed, and we will move on to the next request for public comment. Again, you will be provided 3 minutes and given a 30-second warning. With that, we do have an individual identified as Holly Carter. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for allowing space for public comment and hearing about industry experience. I work with a small compliance company in the Southern Humboldt area, and we've been quite interested in the application of enforcement. Primarily, we work with CDFA license types, and that's the information that I have to share today. We were able to ask for all inspection records from 2020 and are currently sifting through those. what we're learning there is that it has, as Ms. Nevedal said, been really focused on warnings and education phase. And that education phase is a really important, both for industry, for businesses, but also for the regulators and inspectors, as we're seeing inconsistent application of regulations. Sometimes the regulations that are being issued notices of noncompliance either are or aren't, or have been told, are or aren't even in regulations in some instances. So the discretion can be helpful, but can also be harmful in some ways. Some of what we're seeing is the different departments at CDFA telling us that something will work or is approved, and then later one or another of the inspection or enforcement teams on site saying that that doesn't work, or that they would like to see it differently, and whether or not that's a personal read or an agency read. We're having a lot of difficulty understanding that piece. So I wanted to share that information. We are not finished sorting through and sifting through all of the inspection and notices of noncompliance that we did receive from 2020 in a Public Records Act request. But what we have seen is very few fines issued so far. So we don't know if there's been deterrence, because that hasn't actually been really applied. The Bureau of Cannabis Control was unable to release those, and I'm in conversation with the Department of Public Health right now to be able to learn a little bit more about their process. So I cannot share about either one of those at this point. But happy to share what we learn as we sift through that in more detail. But again, just my biggest concern is that there is an education phase for the regulators, which will continue as we see consolidation. I would assume that the teams will stay specialized, but there is internal work that needs to be done on cohesion there. So the inconsistent application is what causes most of my concern at this time. Thank you for the time.
Our next public comment comes from Paul and Susan Hansbury. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hi, this is Paul Hansbury from Lovingly and Legally. I wanted to talk briefly, and I think it's relevant, about the code enforcement in Mendocino County. I got a notification that there was an enforcement action on May 7th. So the plants were probably 10 to 12 inches tall, but they came and tried to abate 500 cannabis plants. The fine were as follows: $390 per day for non-permitting structures for cannabis cultivation, $2,000 per day for violations for Mendocino County Cannabis Cultivation Ordinance, and a $100,000 one-time per plant penalty for non-permitted cultivation. They're never, ever going to collect that money. So I'm wondering, when you're assessing the fines, if what's happening in Mendocino County and in Humboldt County is that they're assessing these fines and people are just walking away, which means that the state or the county gets the property. They have to do all the remediation, and it's a loss. Everybody loses. They've got a worthless piece of property that they got to spend more money on remediating and cleaning up. So I'm trying to figure out what you're trying to accomplish by putting these fines on people that you're not going to get, you're not going to collect. Is it trying to put them out of business? They'll just go into business someplace else. So just an observation. Thank you very much.
Next, we have an individual identified as Erica Leary. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Erica Leary. I am a program manager for a local prevention coalition in North San Diego County, the North Coastal Prevention Coalition. And I'd just like to point out some of our frustrations and concerns regarding preventing access to minors. Our coalition has worked in preventing underage drinking and tobacco use and other drug use for over 25 years. We've learned a lot from the ABC in conducting decoy operations. Tobacco retail licenses help deter youth access to tobacco. And we have been advocating and trying to get the same process in place for marijuana sales, and have learned that nobody is doing any kind of decoy operations at all. And especially when it comes to delivery, it feels like a dereliction of duty by the Bureau of Cannabis Control that they ruled that delivery could happen anywhere in the state, and yet did not design a process to make sure that delivery was not happening to minors. So whatever the penalty, it's not that high penalties and fines are necessary. The ABC does routine decoy operations, and they have a 3 strikes law in place that in theory, an ABC licensee that sells 3 times within 3 years to a minor can lose their alcohol license. So that kind of similar structure needs to be in place for cannabis businesses so that they know there are consequences and penalties and adhere to the law in preventing sales to minors. And that's all I needed to say today. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from an individual identified as Wade Laughter. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Yes, good morning. My name is Wade Laughter. I'm with House of Harlequin in Nevada County. I wanted to speak to a couple of things. One, the real elephant in the room and the real conversation around enforcement is agenda item number 4. But on agenda item number 2, I would really encourage the department, once it's consolidated, to recognize that the people they're working with are actually trying to obey the rules. And there are many, 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 many rules, some of them contradictory at the moment. But in terms of fostering the growth of this industry, and particularly the potential growth of small businesses throughout rural Northern California, I would really encourage the department to recognize that there's a learning curve, to the comments of Holly Carter that made earlier about the learning curve, not just for the licensed operators, but for the regulators. And that I would put forward the idea that the department take on the attitude of, we are in this together, let's figure it out and make it work. And that's, thank you for taking the time to listen to my comments. I'm enjoying this conversation very much. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from Paul and Susan Hansbury. They are 2 separate using the same computer. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hello, good morning. Good morning, Chair Clifford. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay,
yes, we can. Yes.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Susan Tiven, lovingly and legally. You know, one would assume that the smaller low-hanging fruit are going to be the ones who are going to be fined before the larger, more difficult to access operations. And I'm wondering if in the long run, it might be more prudent to treat some violations, particularly violations that occur on very small operations, which are obviously more like a home business than anything else, that we treat those violations more like a broken tail light fix-it ticket. The smaller operations just do not have the cash, sometimes not even to do the things they would like to be doing on their farm, let alone to address thousands of dollars in fines. So putting people out of business, it's just going to incentivize further the alternative market and really continue to hurt the small communities. Recently, the sheriff, in Humboldt County, has testified that there was a perception that there would be a lot of cash on hand. And yet he was finding that, in fact, there was not the cash to pay these fines, and the county was just getting stuck with properties that people walked away from. So please consider, again, for more minor violations, for more smaller operations, issue the citation, more like a fix-it ticket, and then the operator would be asked to send in whatever paperwork was necessary to prove that she had taken care of the particular violation. I think in the long run, this will help everyone rather than continuing down this road of, continued perception of criminality. Thank you very much.
As a reminder to members of the public, we will not be utilizing the hand raise feature for the members of the public. If you currently have your hand raised, please lower it. For your reference, being displayed on your screen are instructions to request public comment. Next, we have an individual identified as Joe Eberstein. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Yes, good morning, committee members. My name is Joe Eberstein with the San Diego County Marijuana Prevention Initiative. I want to strongly encourage this committee to step up enforcement around deliveries. We work with youth throughout the region and know deliveries are an access point for minors, especially during COVID when restrictions were lacking. Minor decoy operations and ID checks and compliance checks will help keep compliant businesses in line with BCC guidelines to ensure high-potency marijuana products are not getting into the hands of minors. We support the BCC, local law enforcement, in joining with prevention in making these operations become a common practice. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from Kelly McCormick. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Good morning, this is Kelly McCormick, and I'm a public health educator. I also run a youth mentor group, and I would like to encourage the BCC to have a funding for minor decoy operations. It's vitally important. We know from the tobacco world that kids are very easily able to buy vape products at retail outlets, and we know from the alcohol world that minor decoy operations reveal a high level of responses of kids who are able to purchase alcohol. So it's vitally important that the BCC do minor decoy operations on marijuana. It should be standard practice, just as it is with alcohol. And our kids' health is really dependent on your watchfulness and making regulations to keep them safe, which was one of the promises of the industry and the BCC when this whole operation came about. So please make their safety a priority and make a allotment of money and personnel for minor decoy operations, and or join with sheriff's departments and police departments to do minor decoy operations. Thank you.
Hi, this is the Bureau. I just want to remind the public that we are only taking public comment on agenda item 2, which should be about discussion and possible action to adopt recommendations on the disciplinary tiers of regulatory and statutory violations in the disciplinary guidelines. All other comments can be brought up during agenda items as follows, but we're only taking comments on agenda item number 2. Thank you.
With that, our next public comment comes from Judith Strang. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Good morning, Judy Strang here. I was taken with the comments from the facilitator regarding the fine structure, that it didn't seem to be working, and also the concern that warnings and education weren't working. As a person who heads up a parent group that's been concerned about a marijuana storefront in my community, I'm hoping that we're going to investigate that comment thoroughly so that we can understand what would work to help our storefronts understand that the community depends on them to operate properly, and that we were promised under Prop 64 our young people wouldn't have access to marijuana through retail settings. If this is a problem associated with not enough resources from BCC or enough personnel from BCC, or a financial budgeting issue, I hope that we can rectify that so that we can count on the BCC to have the interest of young people at heart. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from Casey Strang. Your microphone has been unmuted.
I think I see in the chat that she wants to defer her comment till the general public comment at the end.
Thank you. Our next public comment comes from an individual identified as William Perno. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Thank you. So I understand that the comments on minor sales and delivery compliance checks will be a different agenda item. So I will comment on your tiers of enforcement, and just to note that as you look at this issue, I hear what some of the people are saying. There's different levels of corporate involvement. Some businesses have a lot of money, some don't. So for some of these businesses, they may see a fine just as a cost of doing business, and it may not necessarily encourage compliance. For your smaller businesses, that may be something that encourages them to comply with whatever violation might be investigated or sustained against them. But I would suggest that you look at some point as to the one thing that will gain compliance from either a large corporation or a small business that does not change their ways and continues to do violations, which we've seen in San Diego, where I'm from, is to have something that's a robust rule that stops sales of the product, in this case, marijuana, because we know from alcohol and tobacco that there will be across the board a level action that will oftentimes gain compliance, or just the that in the violations penalties will cause a business to think twice about doing those violations in the first place. So as you look at tiers and whether monetary penalties will be sufficient, I encourage you to have at least something in the rules that would allow for a suspension if there's repeated violations of the same manner and the monetary penalties are not deemed effective. Thank you.
Thank you. This is the chair. Just by way of clarification to all the commenters, so you're aware, we do not have a separate item on the agenda today for dealing with minor issues. We do have, by law, a general public comment item at the end of the meeting for any items not on the agenda. So folks will have a chance to comment on whatever they wish at that time. Thanks.
Thank you for the clarification. Our next public comment comes from Katie Popignac. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Good morning. My comment is about youth, and I basically just want to say that and I know that you have a time for that later, but I get postcards in the mail every week that anybody can use a QR code and order any product they want to their home. So that is my concern, is that youth are not getting questioned about their ID, and I am a mental health counselor in San Diego County. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from an individual identified as Sarah Armstrong. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Good morning, everyone. I am Sarah Armstrong, Director of Industry Affairs for Americans for Safe Access and the Policy Chair for the Southern California Coalition. In March of 2021, the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, working in conjunction with some universities, released a report on the ability of children to access licensed retail facilities to purchase marijuana. They completely duplicated the methods that law enforcement uses.
Hi, this is the Bureau again. This is just to remind that public comments should only be taken on agenda item 2, which is about the disciplinary tiers of regulatory and statutory violations in the disciplinary guidelines.
As a reminder to members of the public, you will have your opportunity to make public comment on agenda item number 5 for items not on the agenda. With that, at this time, Mr. Chair, we do not have any additional requests for public comment. Would you like me to close this feature?
Before we do that, I want to just check in with the last speaker and see, make sure, I didn't want to cut her off prematurely, if she did have any other comments that might be more directly related to this agenda item.
Give me
And
one
if not,
moment
that's
to
fine.
give me one moment to locate her in the attendee list. She is unmuted. Sarah, you are unmuted.
Thank you. In terms of agenda item number 2, I hope that the committee will recommend to set up a cheap and efficient way that people who are innocent can clear themselves without spending thousands of dollars. I did hear one horrible rumor where a compliant licensed cultivator was trespassed against as people moved towards an unlicensed facility and subsequently reported had to spend thousands of dollars to clear their name. They were compliant. I hope that the committee will recommend that the licensing authorities set up a way where small farmers who are not really guilty of anything or may not even be growing marijuana have a way to quickly and quietly and cheaply clear their names. I'll be back to talk about agenda item number 4, and I apologize for taking up your time, but so many of the previous speakers were speaking about surrogates that I feel we need to clear this up. Thank you.
We did have another comment come in, an individual identified as John Brower. Your microphone has been unmuted. Please keep in mind this is for agenda item 2 only.
Thank
John
you.
Brower, you are unmuted.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you. In light of the, well, I guess what we could call a rocky rollout to the entire program statewide, and the 3 licensing agencies still in mostly a compliance posture, it seems we don't really have information at this point to see if the fine structure has been effective or not. Up in Trinity County, we're watching it be quite effective, and we're watching big moves toward full compliance amongst the licensees with the existing compliance and sometimes violation actions that have been happening thus far. So at this point, I think it'd be premature to change much as far as the fine structure. I think as consolidation happens, I think it behooves us to stick with what we've got right now and see how it works over time. Seems to be working pretty good, but there's definitely areas for improvement. Thank you.
At this time, there are no additional requests for public comment. Would you like me to close this feature?
This is the chair. Yes, please do.
Feature has been closed.
So I'd like to thank members of the public for that input and comment. And I'd like at this point to throw it back to the committee and to see if there are additional comments or motions that the committee members would like to make, having heard public comment. Oh, Member Wu.
So I think specifically to agenda item 2, I mean, we're being asked, do we want to make any recommendations regarding the tiering process, along, I guess, with the general consolidation. So one, with respect to Member Nevedal's comments on, growing, that we need to figure out a better way to incorporate that. So did we want, I guess, more question, but did we want to make a suggestion or, a recommendation as a subcommittee to talk about how to ensure that? And then 2, I really like the last point that was made regarding data, right? I mean, this is a new system, so understanding how well this, penalty system is working, we won't really know unless we are getting data. And I think historically, that's my biggest complaint is we haven't gotten any data. So, as a subcommittee, could we make some type of recommendation that, BCC or, whoever the final regulatory body is, that, we get an annual report on, fines, penalties, and statistics, so that we can see the effectiveness over time. I think that's what I would want to ask for. So I think that's a two-parter.
Perfect. Yeah, that's good. And on the second point, my first question would be like, does something like that exist, or are there plans for something like that in the works already that we'd want to know that maybe we can ask about? But I agree that with your two-parter, that I think there's some kind of recommendation I hear forming around Member Nevadal's point about, size matters, but it's different in the cultivation context than the other context, and some kind of recommendation about how to reconcile that. It seems like it would be in order. Is there any, to put you on the spot, Member Nevadal, is there any sort of motion that you can think about making to capture that issue, or other members of the committee? I feel like there's some kind of recommendation that could be made there. Member Nevadal, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, thank you. This is Member Nevadal. I am not prepared to make a motion, but I do just want to maybe, it might be helpful to point out that some of the challenges around cultivation may be resolved as the state looks towards 2023 and potentially providing a Type 5 license. It would, in a lot of ways, provide some clarity and transparency in the scale of cultivation that's occurring with different license holders. I do anticipate that the licensing subcommittee will meet again to have discussions about Type 5 licenses. But I just wonder if this subcommittee will be meeting again, and it might be too early in the conversation to know. So just food for thought, or a consideration would be to potentially consider coming back to this when we have additional information about any type of licensing restructure. It does feel slightly premature I don't feel like I have enough information to really make a solid recommendation at this time. I think that's what I'm getting at. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a good comment. I do want to make sure that whatever we do, that our comments are timely in terms of process. And I know, which may be the case. I know in the past we've had somewhat tighter deadlines at times where the committees had to weigh in order to get on, be relevant to ongoing processes. I guess, does anyone on the committee or among the staff, is anyone aware of any particular time pressure that we would need to get our recommendations in by in order to make sure that they're considered in due course? Or do we have time to talk about this some more?
Hi, this is Sarah Gardner, counsel for the Bureau. There is not a specific time frame where we have a deadline that this has to come in. As always, the regulations are constantly evolving and changing. So as the committee makes recommendations, we can always consider those.
Thank you for that. I was thinking particularly just in terms of, the backgrounder references several times the coming consolidation of the agencies. So I assume that some sort of some sort of process of consolidating these policies is in process, but unless I hear otherwise from anyone, I'm going to assume that there's time for us to consider, because I agree that it would be good to have more information so we could think about taking this up at a subsequent meeting and still think that we're going to be relevant and timely. So unless I hear otherwise, I'll pause there. The final comment I would make on this agenda item, just myself, is that I heard a great deal of concern, we all did, about from the members of the public about sales to minors. And looking back, interestingly enough, at the disciplinary guidelines for the Bureau on PDF page 4, there's that list of 12 factors there. And when I reread it, I see that there's actually nothing in there. There's no specific consideration about offenses involving sales to minors. There is one, number 2, on actual potential harm to the public, which could incorporate that. But there's nothing, unless I'm missing it here in my skimming, addressing minors directly, and that could be one of the factors. I just want to throw that open for folks' consideration. That is something that could be on here. With that, is there any further comment on agenda item 2? And if not, I think we could move on. Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move us on to agenda item 2, or excuse me, 3, which is going to be similar, I think. Agenda item 3, I'll just read it. Background for recommendations related to how regulatory and statutory
Hi, Chair
violations.
Clifford. This is the
Yes.
Bureau. Can we take a quick break?
We can, thank you. And thanks for checking. There's 5 minutes, 10 minutes? How long would you like?
10 minutes is good.
Let's take 10 minutes, thanks. New chair here, so I can't remember what we've done in the past. We should also think about lunch. I presume we'll break for lunch at around noon and take an hour or 45 minutes, depending on folks' preference. Let's take a 10-minute break now. Let's come back at 11:20. That's a 12-minute break. Thanks, everyone. So this is the chair. Can folks hear me?
We can.
Yeah.
Great. At this point, coming back from the break, I assume we would need to retake the roll just to confirm attendance.
We could just confirm by hand raises, Matt.
Could the members of the committee who are present please raise your hands? Okay, I can see that we have a quorum. Thank you.
And quickly, can we just check in with the court reporter to make sure he's back?
I am here, thank you.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to go ahead at this point and read agenda item 3, next item on our agenda, which is background for recommendations related to how regulatory and statutory violations by licensees should be prioritized for disciplinary action. As the licensing authorities move towards consolidation, what are the considerations when prioritizing disciplinary actions against licensees? Factors to consider can include, but are not limited to, prioritizing by license type, by type of violation, and by severity of violation. And so that's item number 3. And before we start discussion, just to clarify kind of the relationship between this and item number 2, which I want to make sure and everyone else understands. Item 2 was how do we classify in terms of severity the different kinds of offenses that there are that out there that may be committed in the different tiers of severity. Item 3 is how we prioritize, given that there are various violations out there, how do we prioritize disciplinary action to follow up on individual violations, which ones come to the front of the line. And unless I'm mistaken, this is not an issue that is covered currently in the written guidance that was circulated in advance, in contrast to agenda item 2. And I guess I just want to ask Ms. Gardner, the counsel, if she can confirm whether that's correct or if I'm missing something there.
Yes, that is correct. It's we are asking for recommendations on what we should prioritize with going forward, but not on a specific regulation or anything.
Thank you. So there's more of a blank slate here.
Yes.
So thank you. So with that, I'm going to throw it initially open to the members of the subcommittee for any initial comments, suggestions. And if not, we can go to public comment, but I want to give folks a chance to kind of weigh in. I imagine the factors here are going to be, you can make a similar list for the ones that we just went over in item 2, but there may be differences. Seeing none from the committee members, I am going to go ahead and open it up to public comment. We could hear from members of the public, specifically on item 3, which is how to prioritize disciplinary action again for violations by licensees.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the panel, I have opened the Q&A feature. If you would like to make a public comment regarding agenda item 3, please follow the instructions currently being displayed on your screen. You will be provided 3 minutes and given a 30-second warning. I will now pause momentarily to allow individuals time to access this feature. Our first public comment comes from an individual identified as William Perno. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. And thank you, Chair Clifford, for noticing that the Bureau of Cannabis Control doesn't appear to have any things as far as the severity of sales of marijuana to minors. And I know this is going to be something that will come up as well as an agenda item 4 with the illegal marijuana businesses that are out there that are not state licensed. But I think it's really important for the BCC Subcommittee on Enforcement to really take a hard look at what is being done with sales to minors, and if there's been any enforcement action or even compliance checks that have been taken since recreational sales began in January 1st, 2018. And that information should be reported publicly. I would hope that the subcommittee would ask us this for a future agenda item here. And we know that marijuana, like alcohol and tobacco, is an addictive substance. And as a community, we have a collective responsibility to protect children and youth underage access. It's important to note that Proposition 64 and the Cole memo, the federal memo, both made keeping marijuana out of the hands of children one of the highest priorities for the state. Compliance checks are absolutely necessary, and there should be something in the structure of rules to show that it is a very severe violation to be selling marijuana to minors or delivering to minors. And I want to note that a successful compliance check operation is no violations. That's what we hope. The BCC and the state have a substantial interest in promoting compliance with state and local laws intended to regulate cannabis sales and use. We need to discourage the illegal purchase of cannabis products by minors and promoting compliance with laws prohibiting sales of cannabis and cannabis products to minors. And finally, and most importantly, we need to make sure we're protecting children and youth from being lured into illegal activity through the misconduct of adults, whether that's from a state licensed business or an unlicensed business there. We do know that home delivery of alcohol products have been associated with an increased rates of purchase by minors. And we know that the state of California Alcoholic Beverage Control did alcohol delivery compliance checks during 2020, during the pandemic, and the first ones in June of 2020 had a 79% failure rate. Think about that. Almost 8 out of 10 of those vehicle delivery services delivered alcohol to minors. California voters have recognized
30
the danger.
seconds.
Thank you. Have recognized the danger of cannabis use amongst youth and prohibit the sale of cannabis to those under age 21. There's a state law that allows minors to be used to conduct on-site compliance checks. But really, it comes down to if there is no enforcement, if there is no compliance checks, those laws aren't really effective because they're effectively paper tigers. There's nothing that's being done. So we know that there's been some research in San Mateo County, found that 3 out of 7 cannabis delivery companies didn't require an age check before purchases, and only 3 out of the 5.
Time had been reached.
And this is the
Our
chair.
next-
Thank you. I'm sorry to break in to our moderator. I'm just gonna I let that run, but I'm gonna ask folks if there are additional comments to please try to phrase your comments in terms of enforcement priorities, if you can, and just to remind folks that there is going to be a general comment session at the item at the end of the meeting. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next public comment comes from Cody Peterson. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hello, thank you for having me today. I have a more pertinent comment to Article 4, but regarding the enforcement of those licensed distributors, it does seem reasonable that given that California has a 21 and older law, that there could be some way to integrate technology utilizing identification that could be presented for those deliverers. So finding some way to utilize technology and with the California ID system seems really reasonable to try to integrate and help enforce and prioritize some of the concerns, especially around youth use that were addressed previously in this public comment. Thank you. I'm done speaking.
Our next public comment comes from Wade Laughter. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Yes, I wanted to suggest, pardon me, Wade Laughter, House of Harlequin. I wanted to suggest that the enforcement priorities be looked at in terms of the actual harm, for example, to the environment that are done by the violations that are discovered by the regulatory authorities. And the environment is only one of the consequences, for example, associated with cultivation. But for all of the license types, there's where there's harm done to the public, where actual health and safety issues come up. And then there is failure to comply with the rules to keep the records in just the right way. Or I'm not being very clear at expressing my intent here, but I would like to see the enforcement priorities slanted in the direction of legitimate harm to the public and the safety of all of us and the environment that we share. I'm done. Thank you.
With that, we have no additional requests for public comment. Would you like me to close this feature?
Yes, please do.
Feature has been closed.
Thank you. And with that, having heard public comment on agenda item 3, I'm going to throw it back to the committee to see if there are any additional remarks by the committee in light of public comment. Oh, I see. Member Wu, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Member Wu speaking. Just following up on Wade Laughter's comment there, I think I'm on the same page with him. And when I've read agenda item 3 a couple of times, and I think really they're asking us for a recommendation of, again, what are the main items? Not to say what do we consider, how do we want to penalize people? I think that's subject to them. But really, what are the things that we're looking at, or that they should prioritize and cracking down on, or where they should devote the most time and effort? And I think number one, it should be things that directly affect public health, and by that I mean sales to minors. I think is number one on the list there, and things maybe such as that fall within testing to check for pesticides. I think those type of violations, that if there's stuff that's going in there that's really deleterious, and certainly I would want that high on the list as well. And then as I move down the list, then I think things that allow for diversion outside the system, right, would certainly be something I'm aware of. And then, we keep moving down, and certainly then it becomes really more the administrative things. And then personally, I'm not big on that. I think, the idea of a fix-it ticket, right, is reasonable. But I think that's what they're asking us to comment on, right, is how would we want to prioritize that? And I certainly think that, if we were to make a recommendation, I would say that we want to focus on, items that directly affect public health should be ranked up top, and then to me personally, then things that affect diversion and just kind of the accuracy of track and trace would be beneath that. And then I want to make sure that purely administrative things are kind of low on the list. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Wu. And just for the from my part, I think that is exactly what we're being asked. Is what sort of factors like that we think should be prioritized for taking enforcement action, among different violations. And so, other comments from the committee? And if not, I guess there's 2 ways we could go here. We could try, Member Wu, those certainly seems like logical criteria to me to focus on, realizing that as I did not a little while ago, that our output from this committee, of course, is going to be a set of recommendations that would go to the full committee. And so, whatever that does to our timeline, I don't know when the next full committee meeting will be, but that'll push it down the road, but after the one this coming one this week or next week. But that'll slow us down somewhat. Yes.
Sorry, this is Sarah Gardner. The full committee meeting is on the 25th. Yeah, on the 25th of May. It's next week.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And my point being that it's unlikely we'll get another meeting of this group together before then. So any recommendations we wouldn't be acted on until later in the year. But so there's 2 ways we could go. We could
Matt, how it actually works is you guys will make your recommendations here. vote on them to be brought to the main committee. The main committee will then vote to have those to actually, you know, and try to recommend those to us to enforce. So all your recommendations will then go to the full committee next week. And so you will have actual, you know, input within this time frame.
Yes, thank you. No, that was my understanding too. I guess my point is, like, for example, if we don't make specific recommendations, like on agenda item 2, because we decided we didn't really have enough information at this time, you know, if we take that item up again, my only point was that we'll be on a longer time frame than this coming meeting, unless we were to try to pull together a subcommittee meeting in the next week, which doesn't seem likely. So I guess we could do a similar thing with item 3 and table it for now and gather more information and take it up at a future meeting, or we could try to make some kind of, you know, Member Wu, if you were interested in making some kind of motion based on what you've identified, we could do that. I'm open to suggestions.
I personally don't have a problem making I'm just thinking through what the motion should be. Kind of brainstorming out loud. I think the motion for agenda item 3 would be that, you know, we make a motion that suggests to BCC to prioritize, you know, I prioritize activities that directly impact public health with, you know, I'm butchering it right now, but I'm just saying, I want to say something to the effect that, you know, they prioritize, you know, sales to minors as the #1 area for enforcement, and then I'm thinking testing. Beyond that, I don't really want to then say, you know, diversion, or I'm hesitant to start prioritizing for them specifically all these other subcategories, but I do think that the point has been made by the public that, you know, we definitely want to, you know, state that, you know, sales to minors should be the #1 priority. So I think that I would make that suggestion and proposal for agenda item number 3.
Okay, so you might want to, as a motion, so if you want to make a motion specifically addressing sales to minors as a, you know, the most important criteria, you might want to tighten that up. Do you want to tighten that up a bit?
I would ask the rest of the, you know, subcommittee members, can someone make a suggestion? I don't quite know, or if BCC themselves, I just don't know what exactly.
Okay. So if I understand you don't want to make a motion, you want further discussion, or you don't want to make a motion at this time.
I would make a motion if someone, you know, right now wants to suggest the language, I guess.
Okay. Okay. Not quite sure how to proceed here then. Member Nevedal has her hand up. Should we hear from her? If you want to make a motion, I want to give you the chance, but I don't.
You know, please have Member Nevedal speak.
Thanks. I don't mean to put you on the spot. I just don't. I don't want to make the motion. So go ahead, Member Nevedal. Please go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. This is Member Nevedal. I think, you know, I don't know that we need to have a sole priority here. I think we can really have potentially even a list or a number of priorities. I do think that priorities probably vary jurisdiction to jurisdiction, frankly, and region to region, because of the different types of cannabis activities that are likely to occur in the region. I know if we're looking in the, you know, North Coast and the areas where we have more significant amounts of cultivation, environmental issues are probably more of a priority for those regions. And then where we have probably larger urban hubs, right, sales to minors might be a more pressing issue, so to speak. So I'm wondering if we could consider, or if the subcommittee would consider a recommendation that asks the licensing authority to prioritize disciplinary action in relationship to protecting the public's health and our environment. So within that, prioritizing egregious environmental violations, prioritizing sales to minors, and prioritizing the sale and distribution of contaminated products. And granted, maybe contaminated products is not the proper term, and maybe it fits more so into the illicit market category. I'm open. I'm just kind of trying to put some thoughts together for discussions to see if we can get to a motion, and then also trying to kind of reflect back, I think, what we've been hearing from public comment, that there are some very different priorities that come up based on the community that folks are in the regions and what kind of cannabis activities are occurring in those regions. So I'll pause and see if we can have a little more discussion, but I think we're pretty close to potentially shaping a motion. I'm happy to vote.
Great, this is the chair again. That makes sense to me. The moderator, you have your hand up? Oop. Okay, that makes sense to me. I also sense that we're focusing in on emotion here, and I take the point that certain factors will be more prominent and more to move to the forefront in certain areas. You know, environmental harm in the cultivation areas of the North Coast, particularly. That, you know, and other kind of violations in a more urban setting. But that having been said, I mean, I think we certainly can identify some factors, and I think you just did, that we know are important to, you know, everywhere potentially, or regardless of where they arise. They may not be important in all types of operations, but we know that they're important where they do arise. So some kind of motion based on, so far you, Member Nevedal, you identified factors for priority would include environmental harm, serious environmental harm, sales to minors, and sales of contaminated products, or whatever the proper term is. That makes sense to me. Member Wu, go ahead.
So is it kind of a two-parter where in one part we're almost making a statement or a reminder to, you know, BCC and regulators that, hey, different locations should have different priorities, you know, kind of that statement. And then the second is that motion, which I think you know, Member Nevedal did a really good job in terms of kind of summarizing that, prioritizing, you know, environmental. I would still put, you know, public safety, you know, sales to minors kind of on top, just to make that point, but not to necessarily say that, you know, it is more important. I'm just saying that, you know, we put those two both in there, as well as kind of the third contaminated, adulterated statement as well. Yeah. Would those be two separate points then? That, you know, one is more of just a reminder that, you know, we urge regulators to, you know, take a, you know, a geographically kind of dependent focus on regulation, and then make that second statement?
Yeah, so for what it's worth, those strike me as things that could go in the same motion, you know, like a preamble and then a list. But Member Nevedal, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for that, Member Nevedal here. I was not suggesting a regional approach to prioritization. I was really trying to reflect back that I think the concerns, the public's concerns tend to be a little different depending on where they are. So, for example, the North Coast doesn't have as strong of a retail segment in the legal marketplace as they do a cultivation segment. So the issues that arise for those communities are much more focused on the environmental degradation that might occur, right, from licensed and unlicensed activities, whereas in a more urban area where you have more retail presence, legal retail presence, the issues that tend to arise for the public tend to be more around the quality or the safety and efficacy of the products being sold at those facilities and sales to minors. So I would prefer not to fold in a regional recommendation. I was just pointing out that we have a diverse group of public parties bringing concerns to the table, and so we should think a little more holistically about the different priorities that might come up depending on where folks are in the state. So I would just leave it pretty broad and ask the licensing authority to prioritize for disciplinary action issues that directly impact public health and or environmental well-being. And then we could even specify the sale of contaminated products, sales to minors, and egregious or serious environmental violations. That would be my recommendation.
Okay. We're not quite to a motion yet. Member Wu, go ahead.
I was just going to say I completely support Member Nevedal's comments there. And then my only other question was to Member Williams and Woolsey is just from a, is there anything else we might want to consider given, they are both, within law enforcement. I just wanted to kind of get their opinion if they wanted to add anything or they think this is sufficient.
Yes,
Committee
please.
Member Williams. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I think it's adequate, and I think, prioritizing enforcement, especially by considering public safety, what causes the most harm is important. And protecting our minors from being able to purchase, I think, is equally important. So I think the recommendation going forward, I think it's sufficient. I'll defer to Woolsey as well.
Member Woolsey, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, and I would agree that it's sufficient in its. Thank you.
Thanks. You broke up pretty badly there, but I think I heard you say that you thought it was sufficient, that the current idea
Yeah,
was sufficient.
that would be correct.
Thank you. I don't want to call it a motion because again, I feel like we're not quite there yet. So here's my question. I'd like to get a motion from someone who is willing to make it. Well, the one question I have is whether or not we want to put some kind of preamble on it. My own view is that given this is an advisory committee and not some kind of body making statutes, is that kind of broad advice is appropriate and I think relevant if we want to say something to the effect of, in general, we understand that violation, the priorities will be different in different contexts, and we recommend that the agency acknowledge that and take a flexible approach, something to that effect. We could preface it with that and then provide some kind of list of, that being said, we think that the following types of violation should be prioritized, and then make a list, or we can simply go with a list like that. I'll leave that up to whoever wants to make the motion, but I think we could go either way. So is anyone willing to make a motion at this point based on this discussion? Member Nevedal.
I'll take a crack at it, and so let's see how it goes. I propose that we recommend that the licensing authority prioritize for disciplinary action violations that impact public health and our environment, specifically with a focus on egregious environmental violations, the sale of contaminated or unsafe products, and sales to minors.
Thank you for that. Is there a second? Member Wu. Member Williams. And Member Wu, if you seconded it, you were on mute.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize that. Member Nevedal, would you, I agree, all three are important, but I think having, so much of the public on here talk about sales to minors, would you consider moving just the sales to minors to the front piece? And I'm not necessarily saying that becomes the number one, but these, we're making a statement where we're saying these are the three important things.
This is Member Nevedal, and I am more than happy to put sales to minors first. We could do contaminated products and unsafe products second, and then egregious environmental violations third. That would also match the preamble, so to speak. I'm happy to make that amendment. And so, moderator, if you need clarification or you want to read it back, please do let me know.
Thank you. I would second that, as I feel members of the public would be happy with that.
And I was going to make the same to the court reporter. And just for the record, we may be out of order here. I don't know. We have a motion and we're amending it before a second. I don't know if that's proper, but I think we have. I think the question at this point to the court reporter is: did you understand the amendment, and do you feel like you have the motion? I don't know if it's a question for the reporter or for the bureau, but whoever is taking the motion, do you have enough clarity?
I have half of the motion. I think I have the whole motion, but if Member Nevedal will just repeat it one more time, I'll reread what I have and we can verify that it's correct.
I think that's the best way to go. Thanks.
Would you like me to go first, moderator?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. So recommendation that the licensing authority prioritize for disciplinary action violations that impact public health and result in environmental degradation. I don't know if those are my exact words, but with priority on sales to minors, the sale of contaminated or unsafe products, and egregious environmental damage.
Okay, I have it.
Oh, sorry, I'm talking on mute. First time today. And we have the motion. Thank you. Is there a second?
Ben, yes.
Member Wu here. I second the motion.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. I'm going to open it up to discussion, but before we do that, the lawyer in me is going to speak for a second. And I say there was an and at the beginning of your motion, which I think should be an or. Member Nevedal, that the priority should be to, I think this is your intent, that violations that either involve the environment or public health.
I accept your friendly wordsmithing amendment, Member Clifford. Thank you for that.
So, and I'm sorry if I'm being pedantic, but I think it's probably appropriate in the context. Okay, discussion by the committee.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Matt, can you repeat that?
Yes, and in the first line of the motion, there was an and, which should be an or, talking about the, I don't remember the exact text, but we recommend that priority be given to violations that involve severe environmental harm or public health. And I think she had said and.
Okay, I got it.
Thanks. Thank you. Okay, further discussion by the committee?
Hold on, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Member Neville here, just a point of housekeeping because we did do a minor friendly amendment. I would like to just make sure that Member Wu, who seconded the motion, is also comfortable with the friendly housekeeping amendment to the motion.
Member Wu speaking. Yes, I am comfortable, and I second again.
Thank you, and thank you, Member Novell, for keeping us copacetic here. So, any further discussion by the committee? Okay, so our next step here is going to be to go to public comment on the motion. We're also coming up toward lunch, and I guess my inclination is that we should go ahead and soldier through public comment and take care of this item. I have a feeling it may run somewhat long, but unless someone feels strongly otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to public comment. Okay, so at this point, I'd like to ask the moderator to open public comment on the motion.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the panel, I have opened the Q&A feature. If you would like to request public comment, please click on the question mark within the square located in the lower right-hand portion of your screen. For your reference, being displayed on the screen are instructions to make public comment. Please be mindful that no other means to request public comment, i.e. hand raising or asking questions directly in the panel, will be ignored, and we will move on to the next request. You will be provided 3 minutes and given a 30-second warning. With that, we do have our first request coming in from an individual identified as Robert Stein. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Good morning. Thank you for letting me talk. I am a clinical pharmacist and represent a group of pharmacists that are interested in the medicinal applications of cannabis. We are calling ourselves the Cannabis Pharmacist Coalition of California. And our ultimate concern is definitely related to some of these enforcement issues. Consistency in labeling of products is a real issue that I've observed from looking at various products from legitimate dispensaries, and including, the terpene analyses, which I believe when this board was originally being created, that was one of the requirements that was going to be on labeling, but I have not seen that on any product. And again, being able to reach the certificate of analysis for consumers is extremely important, and certainly for professionals that are recommending cannabis for medical use. And I guess I'll hold off on the comment regarding the next item on the agenda, but those are the key points that we want to make. Thank you.
Our next request comes from an individual identified as Wade Laughter. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Wade Laughter, House of Harlequin. I would like to thank the members of the committee and speak fully supportive of this motion. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from Casey Strang. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Good afternoon. Hello, BCC Enforcement Advisory Committee members and staff. My name is Casey Strang. I'm the Executive Director of the San Marcos Prevention Coalition. We are a youth, drug, and alcohol coalition working to prevent and reduce drug use. And we very much support this motion and want to thank Committee Member Wu for kind of getting the ball rolling in terms of prioritizing sales to minors as really a priority. And let me explain to you why. The BCC, as we know, has been regulating the marijuana industry for 3.5 years now, yet they do not do minor decoy operations on delivery services. Proponents of marijuana commercialization and legalization told us that it was in the best interest of the public to legalize marijuana and regulate it like alcohol, and that it would ensure teens wouldn't have access to marijuana because it would be a well-regulated market. Yet 3.5 years have passed, and the BCC still has not prioritized preventing youth access to marijuana. Minor decoy operations on delivery services will help protect our teens from accessing marijuana. The state's alcohol beverage control, the ABC, has done 9 statewide minor decoy operations on alcohol deliveries just in the past 12 months. The first set of operations found an 80% sell rate to minors. What we don't understand is why the state's Bureau of Cannabis Control, the BCC, doesn't do minor decoy operations with their delivery drivers. Why is marijuana getting a pass? We also don't understand why the BCC staff advisory committee has spent a significant amount of time working on regulations for delivery of marijuana, yet the BCC does not do compliance checks if the drivers are adhering to the rules, with one of the most important, of course, selling to minors. We've experienced too many heartbreaking stories from our families whose teens have used today's highly potent marijuana products and suffered severe mental health disorders like depression, psychosis, and even suicide. It's long past time that the BCC steps up, prioritizes public health and safety for our neighborhood, families, and our youth. So we ask you, please help protect our teens from today's highly potent and attractively flavored marijuana products that are being driven around our neighborhoods in delivery vehicles. Work to prohibit youth access by conducting these minor decoy operations on delivery services. Thank you so much for your time and to your attention to this important issue.
Thank you. This is the chair, and thank you for the comment. We appreciate folks' comments. I'm going to direct additional commenters, please be aware that the motion here, that the comment here is on the motion, which involves enforcement priority criteria. And just to be clear, that does not, the motion doesn't involve methods of enforcement or anything like that. And there will be opportunity to comment on those things later, but we are going to want to keep on track here just to keep the meeting moving. So please be aware of that and make your comments accordingly. Thank you. Moderator, please go to our next comment.
Our next public comment comes from an individual identified as William Perno. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you, and I'll be brief. I echo the other comments said, and I just really want to thank the committee members who recognize the wording and the placement of that language to prioritize enforcement on sales to minors at the front of that document is important. Thank you so much for listening to the public, hearing the public, and understanding how much of an important issue this is for public. And again, at the end of the day, the hope is that licensed businesses comply with the laws and that a successful operation is no violations, but we need those compliance checks. And we hope this will help move the BCC towards doing compliance checks that have been lacking for since recreational sales began January 1st, 2018. Thank you for your time and for prioritizing that item. Thank you.
Next, we have an individual identified as Holly Carter. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hello, and I'll also be brief and want to say thank you to the committee for hearing the comments and the intent of the entire program of commercial cannabis. I think moving the focus of agencies into the larger picture and the types of violations that impact, types of enforcement actions that impact public health and environmental health is where we should be headed as an industry as a whole. So I want to thank you for hearing all that and offer my support. Thank you.
Next, we have Michael Cooper. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you for your time and efforts on these important issues. I'm the managing member of Madison J Solutions. We're regulatory advisors to operators in the adult use market. One additional consideration that I wanted to flag that could perhaps be accomplished through an amendment here or a separate motion is to explicitly prioritize enforcement against bad faith violators and to explicitly consider good faith efforts to comply a factor to deprioritize enforcement. This reminds the market, and particularly the good operators, that the real costs that they incur are recognized and appreciated. I would also add on these important questions that everyone that we've worked with in the regulated industry would wholeheartedly agree with an emphasis on preventing sales to minors, though I would add that to the extent that you want to limit sales to minors, one of the most impactful steps you could take are to promote the regulated market at the expense of the illicit market. The illicit market, of course, does not ID purchasers. Thank you.
Next, we have an individual identified as Cody Peterson. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Oh, and thank you to everyone on the board, in particular to Mr. Wu and Ms. Nevedal for really putting forward a really tangible and feasible bill. Again, my name is Cody Peterson. I'm a pharmacist at Children's Hospital of Orange County. I am also here, like Bob's time before me, representing the Cannabis Pharmacist Coalition, because cannabis is medicine. In fact, California declared it so in 1996, and I think we need to continue to drive it forward. In order to call cannabis medicine, we must start treating it as such, and that means regulating. And so I want to commend the board members for having this meeting and trying to move towards an enforcement that has the best interest both of the state and of the public in mind. So I just wanted to point out that my primary concern as a pharmacist is always the health and safety of patients and also the efficacy of the cannabis medicine they get. Certainly, I'm interested in enforcing environmental harms to the state, but frankly, I'm more concerned with the human harms that could come from illicit or illegal products. So my primary concern has to do with not necessarily the enforcement, which is in number 4, the next agenda item, but actually in the not the punishment, but rather the actual purvey and finding a way. So we need to make it clear to patients and their parents. Again, I'm a pediatric pharmacist. I've run into parents who are going to illicit dispensaries and getting products that are not tested, and then trying to utilize that medicine for their children. And I have real concerns about an unregulated market that is not being enforced by the BCC. And so I want to urge the BCC to really take a focus on these illicit distributors, because as the people the commenters before me mentioned, these if they're willing to break the law in order to open the dispensary, they're also willing to break the law to deliver or to sell to minors. So the biggest focus needs to be on not enforcing obscene fines and obscene rules on the illicit dealers and growers who are, dispensaries and growers who are trying to do things the right way and complying, but rather on those who are blatantly disregarding the law.
I will have to cut in here. Thank you for that comment, but we are just talking about the motion that was made.
Thank you, co-moderator. Our next public comment comes from Sarah Armstrong. Your microphone has been unmuted.
I am Sarah Armstrong, Director of Industry Affairs for Americans for Safe Access and Policy Chair for the Southern California Coalition. This motion is a good start, but it needs one more component, and that's that the confusion over whether minors are accessing cannabis and cannabis products often arises from the fact that illegal entities are doing their best to pose as licensed operators. They go to great lengths here in LA, both the delivery services and the retailers. These are not legal shops. They do not conform to the state law. And I would hope that as you move forward, you will keep a close eye on these illegal shops that go to such length to pose as reputable business operators that even fairly sophisticated consumers cannot tell the difference. This is what is behind the concern about selling to minors, and it is something important to address. I hope that the committee's work will continue and you will address things like counterfeiting, which is a huge problem. Also, poisonous products addressed in this motion, I'm happy to see. And invite for a series of discussions people on the front lines in enforcement. In Los Angeles, the city attorney has closed over 1,300 illegal cannabis businesses from 2013 to the present time. He did this without starting the War on Drugs 2.0 by using civil
Hi, Sarah.
movements.
I'm going to have to cut in again. This is moving off topic to the motion that's at hand and what we are taking public comment on. If you'd like to get back on topic, you can have the rest of your time. Otherwise, we're going to have to move on.
Just to encourage the committee to move forward and keep working on this issue. This motion is a good start, but there is so much going on with the illegal operators, and we won't be able to address it until we understand it. Thank you for your time.
Our last public comment comes from an individual or individuals identified as Paul and Susan Hansbury. Your microphones have been unmuted.
Yes, good afternoon. I think that the motion is, as stated by the previous speaker, a very good start. I was intending to echo what she had to say about the illegal operations, that perhaps it's not a regulatory thing, and maybe you wanted to add it to the motion, that the priorities should also be towards illegal operators and not the people that are trying to do the right thing. This would be a big deal, I think. Thank you very much.
At this time, we have no additional requests for public comment. Would you like me to close this feature?
Yes, please do.
Feature has been closed.
Okay, with that, I would again thank the members of the public for that comment. And so we've heard public comment on the motion. Is there any further discussion by the committee? And if not, we have a motion on the table in a second. So let's go ahead and take the vote.
Okay, I will reread the motion and then call roll for the vote. The motion is to ask the licensing authority prioritize for disciplinary action violations that directly impact public health or environmental degradation, specifically focus on sale to minors, sale and distribution of contaminated or unsafe products, and egregious environmental damage. When that will call roll, we have Matt Clifford.
I vote aye.
Kristen Nevedal.
Aye.
Helena Williams.
Aye.
David Woolsey.
Aye.
Ben Wu.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you. Moving on, I'm seeing it's 12:09 now, so it probably makes sense to break for lunch. I'd like the sense of the committee on this, given the meeting format that we're in, and my desire to keep the meeting moving along. I'm hoping we could take a relatively short lunch. And so my question is, if I were to make lunch as short as a half an hour, would I get resistance from the committee or anyone or the staff? Hearing
No.
none.
Matt, as long as the court reporter,
Yes.
I'm sorry, as long as the court
Thank
reporter
you.
is okay with that, then we're fine.
Thank you, and that's important. Okay.
This is the court reporter. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Great, thank you very much. And definitely want to, please don't be afraid to speak up if it's not, because thank you. So with that, let's go ahead and break for lunch, and I'll see everyone back here at 12:40, 1/2 hour from now. Thanks, everyone. It's 12:40, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started here with our last substantive agenda item. But before we do that, would all the committee members who are present please raise your hand if you haven't already? I see a couple of you have. And so far, I see 2 hands. 3. I don't know off the top of my head what a quorum is. Is it a 5-member committee and 3 would be a quorum? Can the
Yes.
Okay, fine. So we do have a quorum. So I'm going to suggest that we just go ahead and members, Nevedal and Wu, you had your hands up. I don't know if you were just saying yes, we're here, or if you had anything you wanted to say. Oh, hands are down. So go ahead. Okay.
Can we check in with the court reporter to make sure he's still here?
I'm sure that's a good idea. Thanks.
And we are waiting for our legal counsel to be added. So give us just a few more minutes.
Sure thing.
And the court reporter is ready when the others have checked in.
Perfect. Thanks. So let me know when counsel is here, and we'll get started.
I am here if you can hear me now.
I can. Thank you.
All right.
All right, on to our last agenda. No, it's not our last agenda item. It's our last substantive agenda item, which is the one I think a lot of folks are interested in, having to do with unlicensed operators. So to get us rolled off here, I'll read it, and then I have an immediate question. But so this item is background for This is recommendations related to how the Department of Cannabis Control should prioritize enforcement actions against unlicensed operators. As the licensing authorities move towards consolidation, what are the factors to consider when prioritizing enforcement actions against unlicensed operators? Factors to consider can include, but are not limited to, It says they are limited to, but I think it's a typo. So they include, but not limited to, prioritizing by type of unlicensed activity, how each jurisdiction allows or prohibits commercial cannabis activity, in coordination with local jurisdictions. So that's how this agenda item is stated. I'm going to say off the top that dealing with enforcement, my first question when we talk about prioritizing enforcement is enforcement by whom? Because there's a number, right, of entities, agencies out there that can enforce various aspects of violations, right? You can get for unlicensed operators in particular. There's local law enforcement. There's various of various types. There's the state water board for unauthorized water use or diversion. There's the Department of Fish and Wildlife has all kinds of requirements they can enforce, et cetera. And there's a different enforcement staff out there. This agenda item says how the Department of Cannabis Control should prioritize enforcement actions. So I guess my first question in my mind, what I'm not clear on is, are we talking about something fairly narrow? What role does what role will the Bureau play in operations against unlicensed operators? And I understand, the various actions they can take against licensed folks, but unlicensed folks, I'm at least a little in the dark. And I don't know if we're talking about just the actions the Bureau can take, or if we're something more broadly. And are we talking about criteria for them referring enforcement to other agencies? I'll admit I don't have a lot of clarity on this. So I'll just say that at the start. And having said that, I'll go ahead and throw this open to any initial comments from the committee.
Were you waiting for a response from staff first on this?
Well, that's a good question. I wasn't very clear about that, was I? Thank you. Can anyone staff clarify? I guess if we can get that, if anyone could comment from the staff, either council or from the Bureau, about what actions that the licensing agencies can take as far as that the Bureau can take as far as enforcement. So just to give us a better sense of what we should focus on with this agenda item.
Absolutely. This is Sarah Gardner, counsel for the Bureau. So in 2020, the Bureau did have the division of, it was DOI, Department of Investigations, and the Cannabis Enforcement Unit specifically, which was its peace officers that were under DCA, and those have all been transferred to the Bureau. So we do have a number of peace officers on staff now. And so as the department, as we consolidate and become a department, it's looking at that. So we do have staff, peace officer staff that can investigate and coordinate with other law enforcement agencies against unlicensed activities. And we can take action against them and issue citations against unlicensed operators.
Okay, so it would be helpful for the committee to focus on then, it seems to me, is like what how should the department, the new department, prioritize enforcement actions by those particular peace officers? It sounds like what we're talking about, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Thank you, that's helpful. Thoughts from any members of the committee? I'll throw it open for discussion. Member Nevedal.
Yeah, so thank you. This is Member Nevedal. I kind of feel like we have the same, I personally have some of the same priorities for folks outside of the program as in the program. So it seems to me that if we're talking about, how to prioritize unlicensed activities, again, unlicensed activities that are impacting public health because there's sales to minors, there's contaminated or otherwise unsafe products being sold into the market. Are pretty major concerns of mine. And then I also have concerns about kind of worker safety in some settings. So I think about unregulated volatile solvent extraction, perhaps, or like what's happening in the workplace if there's no regulations or OSHA occurring. And then, of course, egregious environmental issues. So I think the environmental issues are oftentimes more significant. I think all of these issues are more significant and impactful in the unlicensed or unregulated marketplace. So I'll leave it there for now.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to add, this is the chair again, I'm going to add, that's a great opening list. I'm going to add one possible more thing to the conversation there. That I think those kind of harms are important. The same ones as we would address with licensed operators, right? We don't want them to harm public health or the environment or worker safety or things like that. But there's an additional, I would propose, set of impacts with the unlicensed market, in that we have this consideration of the unlicensed market hurts the legal market, right? Because we want to disincentivize folks from participating there. But, if we don't do that, then the whole system fails, right? And so there may be a set of priorities around targeting folks, so that strategically to help, shut down segments of that market that are competing with legal sales in a particular way, in a particularly impactful way, or focusing on folks where there's a chance to move illegal folks into the legal market, things like that. And so I would just suggest that there's maybe a set of considerations about ensuring the continued viability of, and not, punishing legal operators for choosing to be legal and operating above board. So that's just a thought I have. Other thoughts from other members of the committee? Member Wu.
Yeah, I mean, when I read agenda item 4, I think, at least for the foreseeable future, I would say that, enforcement and targeting the unlicensed operators is just as important as, say, agenda item 3, where we talk about public health and the environment, because it doesn't matter how good a program, regulatory program we have for the legal side, because people can just go to the illegal sellers, then it's kind of all for naught, right? So I would say, to me, enforcement against illegal or unlicensed operators should take just as much priority initially as it should against all the other aspects of the legal market that we're focused on. But then then I think within I think what I don't know if what they're asking is, within unlicensed operators, is there a certain activity type that we should be looking for? And my gut tells me, right, if that's the case, shouldn't we direct them to really focus on cultivation operations? Because from there everything else kind of flows down, right? I mean, obviously I don't want people doing kind of extractions in their garage and blowing things up, but then if you focus on cultivation and eliminate biomass, then inevitably everything else gets a little easier too, right? So maybe I'm wrong on that, but I just thought that if I'm going to focus on one area of unlicensed operators, it would be on the cultivation side.
Right. Member Nevedal.
Thank you. This is Member Nevedal. I actually forgot to lower my hand, but I do have a comment, so I'll lower my hand now so I don't forget again. I think also, I would like to encourage that the Department of Cannabis Control work with the other agencies. I think you had a great point, Member Clifford, in the opening to this item. And I don't know that, I don't know that it's just cultivation. I do think that the illicit retail and the illicit delivery services are a pretty substantial issue, especially as this is how these products are getting into the market. And additionally, this is where we're seeing counterfeit products come into the market, and probably quite robust sales to minors occurring. So I would be hesitant to, if we're going to suggest any types of activities be prioritized, to not also include illicit retail and delivery and distribution activities.
Member Wu?
Yeah, I just want to clarify. I think it's all important, right? I was just taking the position that my assumption is, as regulators, they're going to have very limited resources. And I think what they're asking for us to opine on, though, is, where should they start, or where do where do we think we can make the most impact with the fewest amount of resources, right? And so that's all I was saying, is that I think if you really can attack, the cultivation side, if you can eliminate that or crack down on that, right, it is going to have a flow through effect. But I by no means am I saying that we don't focus on anything else. I was just taking the position that we had to start somewhere. Where would I start? But I don't know. Again, I'm not sure what recommendation is that. What they're looking for us to opine on here, or am I misinterpreting?
No, I think they're looking for us to opine on how, again, it sounds like there's a somewhat limited enforcement staff. As I understand it, the primary operations of the unified agency will be dealing with licensed operators, and there's lots of ways to interact when someone's in the system. You've got regular contact. There's lots of modes of enforcement. Folks are in the system, and that's one and probably the main means of enforcement against the industry writ large. But at the same time, there is some staff of peace officers who are able to go out and take enforcement action either themselves or in coordination with other agencies against unlicensed operators. And I think the question for us is like, what are our thoughts on criteria they we'd want them to use to decide how to, who to go after, how to prioritize who to go after. And I think we've got to start in the list here, but I think that's the question for us. And my own inclination is along the lines of Member Nevedal's reaction to item 2, which is that I think I don't have a lot of information on that at this point to know, other beyond what I've said. Is I think that considering impact on the legal market, at least for me, is an important consideration that I'll be in the mix someplace, because I think that illegal operators are the one thing that I think unifies a lot of us. Like everyone kind of agrees, I think that typically that those folks, whatever we disagree on, those folks are a problem for everyone, because if they're out there, they threaten the viability of this whole system in the legal market, and shutting them down as much as we can is an important thing to do. So, but beyond that, as far as how to have specific priorities, I don't have more information on that, and I'll just be honest about that. So if there's any further comment from the committee, I'd love to hear folks' views. We can also go to comment from the public at any point here, so we may hear some more from that. Okay, so seeing no more from the committee at this point, I guess I'd like to go ahead and open it up to take public comment on item number 4. And before we do that, I'll just reiterate that this is comment on specifically on how to prioritize enforcement actions by the Bureau against unlicensed operators. And so we will hold you to that, so please try and stay on topic. Thanks.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the panel, I have opened the Q&A panel. Please be mindful of what the chair has addressed in terms of what it is you are commenting on. You will be provided 3 minutes and given a 30-second warning. With that, our first public comment comes from an individual identified as Sarah Armstrong. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Once again, I'm Sarah Armstrong, Director of Industry Affairs for Americans for Safe Access and Policy Chair for the Southern California Coalition. Comments made just recently indicate that perhaps the focus of this committee should be on inviting people on the front lines of the fight to bring illicit activity to a close might be really helpful. I mentioned the LA City Attorney's Office. There's also a gentleman named Wesley Hine who's done a lot of work on counterfeiting. And of course, the UCBA has been instrumental in pointing out the problems that arise when CBD stores are actually selling marijuana to minors, because there is absolutely no oversight or jurisdiction on that kind of activity right now. I think what you'll find when you talk to these experts, and I hope you will be the mechanism that invites these people to speak before the larger committee, that enforcement is getting increasingly difficult because it's run through social media, and it's also done through things like secret sessions and sort of ad hoc farmers markets that sell to anyone. But this is a solvable problem, and believe it or not, both the state and local jurisdictions have made progress. I would urge you to become a conduit for good information that will help you determine where scant enforcement money should be spent and how they should be spent. In Los Angeles, all enforcement against illegal activity, illegal cannabis activity, is categorized as overtime activity. That means you may have $10 million to spend on enforcement, but because it involves paying seasoned narcotics officers overtime, the money goes in a heartbeat. So in addition to managing the issue of enforcement, the economic distribution of funds is equally important. I know this is a difficult subject, but we have found in the South that illegal entities are almost always selling contaminated or poisonous products. Our city attorney was the first in the country to add charges for a dispensary that was selling these contaminated products in a pleading. We're still waiting for the court's decision, but that is one tact you could take. So with that, I will just thank the committee for taking this issue very seriously, and I hope that going forward, you will be the benchmark for a thorough consideration of all the economic, legal, political, and emotional issues that attach themselves to the issue of enforcement. Thank you for your time.
Our next public comment comes from Paul and Susan Hansbury. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Yes, hi, this is Paul Hansbury, Lovingly and Legally. Pretty much what the previous speaker said was what I had intended to say. I think that the prioritization, as a couple of the members have mentioned, varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. I would think that the way to establish the priorities might be to create a mechanism or a helpline for the local jurisdictions to call upon these deputies from the BCC to assist them in enforcement for the illegal thing, because they know where the boots on the ground for the local jurisdiction, whether it's an unlicensed dispensary or a CBD shop that's selling contaminated goods or selling cannabis, to an illegal grows, in Northern California, where it's more of a priority, people that are causing environmental damage. I think that the local sheriffs or police department would have a better bead on what the priorities would be in their jurisdiction. So creating a mechanism for them to contact them to assist in their endeavors, I think would be the highest priority and the most efficient. Thank you very much.
Our next public comment comes from William Perno. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. And as you had in your other item, I think sales to minors, the contaminated products and the damage to the environment are key, as well as cultivation. But another area to look at for the unlicensed market is the advertisements, especially by third parties. So we need to make sure that that's looked at, because if you can advertise your illegal product, you are competing with the legal permitted market there. So I really hope that there's some efforts to address that, especially online advertisements. There is no First Amendment or commercial speech protections for sales of an illegal item or product. I think there also needs to be consideration for state funding and state resources for enforcement efforts at the local level for the unlicensed market there. Multi-jurisdictional teams, because some cities and jurisdictions don't have the necessary law enforcement funding and city attorneys or prosecutors for civil or criminal actions. There's also the retail delivery of counterfeit products, sales to minors. We need something more than just citations and monetary fines, because collecting on those fines is questionable, whether any of those fines will ever be collected. And for some, those fines are just a cost of doing business, as we saw in the city of San Diego when they had civil only enforcement. When they begin criminal enforcement as well, it had a significant impact to where there are no brick and mortar storefronts in the city of San Diego, but there is still a robust unlicensed vehicle delivery operations going on with more than 100 of those currently in the city. Also, we don't want to reward continued unlicensed operations with a future state license. There should be something that says very clearly you're not going to be rewarded with a license when you're causing all this harm to the community and the risks that are taking place with those unlicensed products. So again, that civil and criminal enforcement is definitely needed. One thing to consider for vehicle deliveries, is there a mechanism for vehicle forfeiture when those vehicles are being used for those illegal deliveries? And as someone mentioned with the CBD products there, for sales for consumption, including smoking, vaping, and edibles, there's Delta 8 THC that's coming from CBD, and there should be something with the state to take some type of legislation to make sure that any products, CBD or cannabis for human consumption, are coming from a licensed retailer and not
30
from
seconds.
and thank you, and not from any store that just wants to open up and sell these products. So you've got products right now that are being sold that are CBD products that there's no licensing at all going on, and they're clearly being sold for human consumption and for people to get a euphoric high from that. And then finally, the legal marketplace there, it's driven by the vast overproduction of cultivation there. And so until that gets addressed, we're going to continue to see problems with this in the state, and most of that's being exported out of the state. Thank you very much for this very important item.
Next, we have Wade Laughter. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Yes, my name is Wade Laughter with House of Harlequin. And thank you for the conversation on this topic. This is the real issue in my experience, at least in Nevada County. We have literally thousands of farms who a few years ago were doing cannabis at what we estimate is a commercial level. And today we have, I think there's 200 farms in the permit process. And yes, the cultivators they're the low-hanging fruit and easy to find if you use satellite imagery or drones. And there's a whole conversation there going on about and I myself am a big fan of sending letters as versus sending, but I'm getting off topic, pardon me. To the specifics of unlicensed operators, again, I would point to the previous discussion on agenda item 3, I think it was, where the committee came forward with an item of a motion calling attention to the need to protect public health and the environment. And I would suggest strongly that the unlicensed operators be there too, but how to find them is the real issue. Everyone that's in the permitted system is obeying all these rules, and is on everyone's radar, gets looked at on a regular basis and is doing everything they can to comply, and all this conversation about violations and disciplinary actions, et cetera, et cetera. But meantime, the real elephant in the room, again, is all of these folk who, not just cultivators, but people doing extractions with butane in their garage or in their apartment in a complex like happened here in Grass Valley recently, blew the roof off the building. That kind of activity is much harder to find than cultivation, but it is potentially a much greater harm to public health, particularly when you start talking about contaminated products. So yeah, I look forward to the committee perhaps being able to summarize this direction of really looking at the rules around public health and safety. And I'll have further comment later in the meeting. Thank
30
you.
seconds.
I'm done. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from John Brower. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. I'd like to remind the committee that the entire cannabis market, like all markets, is demand driven. And at this point in California, we've got between brick and mortar retail and deliveries, around 1,000 licensed operators to serve the entire state. There are vast areas of the state that have zero licensed, legal, regulated access to clean, safe, lab-tested, tax-paid material. And in my estimation, it's the lack of licensed retail statewide that continues to drive the black market, and sometimes in very dangerous ways. The prior commenter said there's at least 100 unlicensed delivery services just in the city of San Diego. And I think the enforcement energy would be best spent focusing on that demand side of the supply chain that all the other business types, whether licensed or not, are trying to supply. And at the end of the day, the economics of that, I think, make the most sense. And so I would encourage future discussion about somehow getting more licensed retail in the state, and also some means of collaborating BCC or DCC to come, prioritizing their enforcement efforts on the unlicensed retailers that continue to operate statewide with very little, if any, enforcement that we're aware of. I think that's the top priority, to encourage transition to this regulated market that everybody's working so hard trying to develop. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from Robert Stein. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. Robert Stein from the Cannabis Pharmacist Coalition. We strongly support the comments that are being made today. One of our big concerns is the lack of oversight and apparent enforcement of non-licensed dispensaries. And we need a way for the consumers to be able to easily identify actual legitimate dispensaries. So a couple of just thoughts, have licensed dispensaries actually display some kind of an official BCC, medallion, kind of like the old New York taxi medallions, something that would ensure that, only legitimate operators are able to display that. And then the other thing that's really important is, how does the public report non-legitimate dispensaries, and is there going to be action taken when that report is done? Because there's a ton of them here in South Orange County that are definitely not legal. Anyway, thank you.
At this time, there are no additional requests for public comment. Would you like me to close this feature?
Yes, please do.
Feature has been closed.
Okay, thank you. Having heard public comment, I'm going to go back for additional discussion by the committee, and I'm going to start that, actually, if I can take that prerogative. Can someone at the Bureau just give us an idea of how many of these peace officers there are that are able to enforce against unlicensed operators? Just a rough idea.
I don't know how many we have at this time currently. We do have a number proposed in our budget, but obviously that hasn't been approved yet. So I believe we have, I couldn't say how many we have, okay. But yeah.
Okay. Well, that in itself is kind of something to think about. But as we take on this topic, because I think enforcement against unlicensed operators is a pretty big topic, and I think it's important to a lot of folks, as we've heard from comment. And I think the question, in front of us is like how I'm going to assume that whatever that number is, it's going to be a relatively small picture of the statewide enforcement forces out there available against, to go after this huge problem of the unlicensed market in all its various forms, cultivation, retail, delivery, all over, manufacture, all over the state. And so it's really this question of how should the agencies best focus those very limited resources to the most effect. And there's different ways you can go. Some of us would say focus on cultivation. Others say no, retail actually is where, there's public harms of various kinds. It's a big topic. So I personally don't feel very prepared to have much of substance to say on this, because I don't think I have my mind around the issue, but I'm curious what other folks in the committee are thinking. So I'll throw it open if anyone wants to put their hand up. Yeah, Member Wu.
I agree with you. You know, it's a, you know, there's a lot more kind of education I think that needs to be done before we really, you know, make a good recommendation. I mean, is this something that we can recommend to the larger overall committee, advisory committee, that, you know, more time be devoted to this, and, you know, where we can bring in, as I think one of the first comment, one of the first people from public commented that, can we invite different groups to speak on this? I mean, separately, just Member Woolsey and Williams, I'm just curious, within your departments, how much time is spent? How much kind of discussion has there been on enforcement? Are there, you know, are there cross, I don't know, department meetings on this? I just don't know how much attention this takes up already, because my hope is that we can bring in people that can kind of talk about best practices, or better arm the BCC with better ideas.
Hi, this is counsel for the Bureau, Sarah Gardner. To respond to Committee Member Wu's question, this is something that could be agendized for the full committee. That's something that the chair has the option to do. So it's not something that has to be, like, the discussions don't have to occur at this time. You could have it agendized for the full committee at a later date.
Thank you. Or I was going to say, alternatively, I mean, I don't know that we need a recommendation. We could just take more time as a subcommittee with this, I assume. And, you know, if we think there are additional folks that we would like to hear from, we can try to set that up via the subcommittee process. Would that be an option as well?
Yes, that would be.
Okay. Other thoughts from the committee? I don't know if members Woolsey or Williams, if you had anything in response to Member Wu, who was kind of wondering if you guys had experience that, or information that might be relevant. I don't remember exactly what his question was, but I just wanted to give you the chance to respond.
Yeah, this is Member Woolsey. I don't remember exactly what his question was asking. I know that we've, as a local law enforcement, you know, we've looked at our priorities within our jurisdiction and the broader state. I think that there's opportunity when addressing the illegal market to help those licensees who are trying to be part of the legal market thrive by focusing enforcement efforts in jurisdictions that have allowed a legal market, so that those people trying to do business appropriately in those areas aren't overrun by illegal operators. But that, you know, as an enforcement priority, then you have to look at, are the illegal operators in those jurisdictions, are, you know, go after the ones that are targeting minors first, or unsafe, untested product first. If you have any information that can lead you to that, you know, a storefront's easier to identify than a place of where someone's going out of. It could be a warehouse, a house, apartment, you know, all kinds of things. So there are a lot of factors that go into what potential illegal operators, you know, you target first. But that's kind of where I think that priorities should be focused at the state level, is in those jurisdictions that have a legal market that's trying to thrive, but are facing direct competition against the illegal operators in those areas. And at the same time, you have the other problem of those legal operators. I call them legal, meaning they have licenses. Those licensed operators, if they are operating illegally, there also needs to be enforcement efforts against those bad actors in the licensed space. Because if the state is giving in a local jurisdiction is giving a license to an operator, that's basically saying to the public, hey, this is a legitimate place for you to obtain cannabis from, and that has to mean something. And if there isn't enforcement within the regulations that those businesses are following the regulations, then that license or that local approval, you know, means less. And so there are two areas of enforcement that really need to be looked at. And while I agree the straight up illegal market would have a priority over, you know, licensed operators, I think licensed operators still need to be looked at so that that license has meaning. Now, what the enforcement looks like, whether it's education or opportunities to correct deficiencies, I think that's where you go with the legal licensed operators and trying to gain compliance with them. I hope that answers your question. I don't know if it does, but that's kind of where I'm coming from as a local law enforcement representative.
Thank you, Member Woolsey. I'll just add to that one thing you touched on, and then this is Member Clifford again. It came from a comment from public comment was like one consideration which certainly applies in a lot of cases, in some situations, is we don't want to reward unlicensed activity. You know, if someone's like deliberately, operating in an unlicensed operation and benefiting from that. And in many cases, we certainly, a prime consideration is we want to shut that down and not reward that person for not becoming legal. However, in other contexts, it just depends on the context. In the context that I'm most familiar with, the cultivation, it is actually a thing. There are many operators out there who are operating, have been for years as unlicensed operators. And if we drive them out of the legal market and foreclose any chance to get to transition them to the legal market because we don't want to reward that behavior, as a matter of fact, a large number of those operations are not going to fade away into the night. They're going to continue. And the environmental impacts from them are going to continue. And that's a reality that's brought on by the fact that enforcement resources are limited in the real world. And for better or worse, right or wrong, that's something we have to contend with. And that's a real enforcement consideration as well. I guess all of this is by way of just illustrating that this is a real can of worms and a complicated issue about how to best go after the unlicensed market. And we really are talking about I'm assuming a relatively small set of enforcement resources, and how to best target them is really a big issue. So I will just say, as the chair, my inclination is probably to figure out how to agendize this topic in this subcommittee down the road for some more focused discussion and to hear from some more folks. But having said that, I'd like to just ask if anyone on the committee would like to, propose any action that we take at this time as a motion, advice to the main committee for their consideration or otherwise. Or if anyone wants to agree with me that that we should probably get more information first. Yeah, Member Wu.
I agree that a lot more information needs to kind of be discovered here. I think Member Woolsey at least put a new idea in my head, right? One of the things is, do you want to prioritize, targeting illegal operators that are in areas that compete with legal operators versus, in one sense, illegal operators in the area where there are no licenses, and is that lower priority or not? I mean, those are all just interesting. That's just a whole nother aspect I didn't think about. There's a lot to take in here, and whether or not I guess keeping this as a subcommittee actually, in one sense, is more ideal, because frankly, I think we have a lot more opportunity to discuss, subjects without having, 16, 20 people chime in. So I would be, I don't know, I think I would support having another subcommittee discussion on this, because I think it might be more productive that way, because ultimately I think the overall committee is going to defer to us anyways. But on that point, I'm open to debate.
Thank you. That's helpful. I don't know who had their hand up first because I've been looking away, whether it's Member Wu or Member Nevedal, but Member Nevedal, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, thank you for that. This is Member Nevedal, and I'm more than happy to have another subcommittee meeting as well. I do think that there could be some wisdom and even potentially benefit to targeting illicit cultivators in areas where we have larger populations of legal cultivators, especially as I think we see pretty significant cumulative impact when we're dealing with high volumes of illicit cultivators. So, but I'm definitely happy to consider another subcommittee meeting.
Okay, and so I'm sensing some hesitation there. Are you thinking that maybe we should make a motion with regard to that issue? I mean, are you on the fence there? Because that's something we could do. Member Nevedal, yeah.
Yeah, I am open either way. I'll defer to the other subcommittee members. And I apologize, I got a little distracted because my lunch showed up, so my apologies there.
Oh, I'm in the same boat. I'm going on mute so you don't hear me eating. But remember, Woolsey, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for action at this subcommittee meeting, because we're here now and we've heard public comment, I'd be happy to make a motion that we recommend to the larger committee and by extension the BCC that enforcement efforts be focused in jurisdictions that have allowed licensed operators so that they don't face direct competition against illegal operators in those jurisdictions, and also with the focus on if they have the information, unlicensed operators that are targeting or selling to minors and or untested product, which I imagine most of them are. But that's to help ensure public safety that only tested product is in the marketplace. That would be my motion.
Okay. I'm going to ask the people who are in charge of this whether or not they got that motion down in a form that.
We did not. Can you please repeat that, Mr. Woolsey?
Sure. The motion would be that we recommend the BCC, and I'm not sure if we recommend directly to the BCC or if it has to go to the full committee first, but
the full committee.
Recommend to the full committee that we recommend to the full committee that a recommendation be brought to the BCC, and well, for now, all three licensing authorities, but when the BCC, when all three are consolidated into one, that enforcement efforts are focused in jurisdictions that have allowed licensed operators versus jurisdictions that have not, so that those licensed operators have an opportunity to thrive in those jurisdictions, and that if the information is available, the BCC prioritize enforcement efforts against unlicensed operators that are believed to be selling to minors or selling untested or unsafe product.
Okay.
Hopefully you got all of that.
So hopefully you got all of that. I'm going to assume you did unless you say otherwise. And if that's the case, is there a second to that motion? Member Nevedal.
Thank you, Member Clifford. I'm happy to second that motion, but I also would like to request a friendly amendment if possible, if
sure.
Mr. Woolsey is supportive, that
go ahead.
That there also be language inserted to address egregious environmental activities, because I think this is really in a lot of ways plaguing the state in various areas.
So go ahead and second the motion if you would, and then we'll go to that amendment, just so we have it proper
Official
order.
Second, and then I'm happy to suggest a friendly amendment.
Okay, if you just want to suggest the friendly amendment that you just recited, I think that'll work.
Okay, great. And so after the concerns about public health and retail activities, can we please add at the end of the motion and cultivation that results in egregious environmental harms?
Okay. And is the sponsor okay with that friendly amendment?
Absolutely.
Great. Okay, any further discussion? Well, first of all, I just want to confirm that we have the motion as amended in a form that's recorded that we can use.
Can we read the motion again with the amendment so we can make sure we capture it completely?
Yes, I'm trying to think the best way to do that rather than make Good, because we, at this point, we have the motion written down, right, by the reporter? And I don't know whether
this is the court reporter. I have the motion down, but of course there's conversation and a few add-ons in between. So it's good enough for the record, but it's not stated in one simple paragraph.
Okay. So I guess my only question is whether the best way, if we should go ahead and restate it and have the sponsor restate it, let's do that.
We're going to read what we have, and then both David or Kristen can state if we are incorrect.
That makes sense.
So we have recommend that the licensing authority focus enforcement efforts in jurisdictions that allow licensed commercial cannabis operators over jurisdictions that do not, so that the licensed operators can thrive, and prioritize enforcement efforts against unlicensed businesses that are selling to minors, selling contaminated products, or that cause egregious environmental harm.
This is Member Woolsey. That sounds correct. Thank you.
And I am in agreement with that. This is Member Nevedal. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion by the committee? Seeing none, I think this is the point at which we would go to public comment. So I do want to keep us moving here. So I would propose that we take 1 minute for each speaker of public comment, and remind folks that comment is limited simply to the content of this motion, and not topics beyond that. And we'll monitor that fairly closely, and then remind folks that we will have a final comment session at the end of the meeting that's open to any topic not on the agenda. So with that, I'd like to open it up.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the panel, I have opened the Q&A. Once again, you will be provided 1 minute and given a 30-second warning, and I will pause momentarily to allow individuals time to access this feature. We have an individual identified as William Perno. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. And just to comment on the motion, I have just a concern about unintended consequences of prioritizing enforcement against sales of untested or unsafe products from the unlicensed businesses. Could that result in the unlicensed businesses attempting to buy and sell tested products or increase sales of counterfeit products? So I think that that's something to consider. And then for areas where licensed operators are operating, I like that idea of having enforcement there, but we have to consider
30 seconds.
We have to consider that vehicle deliveries will allow sales and deliveries into those areas where the licensed operators are already there, unlike a brick and mortar store, which could be in a different jurisdiction or a different community and completely outside of there. So we keep hearing from local law enforcement here in San Diego that the vehicle deliveries are a very difficult thing to address. So I'm hoping there's resources to really proactively engage against the illegal vehicle deliveries. Thank you.
Time had been reached. Our next public comment comes from Wade Laughter. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Wade Laughter, House of Harlequin. I want to thank the committee for this motion and speak in support of it. I look forward to the conversation going forward. Thank you for your work. I'm done.
Our next public comment comes from Natasha Sokolowski. Your microphone has been unmuted. Natasha, you are unmuted. At this time, we have no additional requests for public comment. Would you like me to close this feature?
If I can get back to the mute button. Yes, please do.
It appears Natasha did send another request. Would you like me to give her the opportunity to speak?
Well, let's hear from her if we can, yes.
Natasha, you are unmuted.
Oh. Okay, sounds like
Feature has been closed.
Yeah, let's go ahead and close it. And I'll just, hopefully, if that speaker can fix the problem we will have one more public comment period. I'll just point that out. Okay, so having heard public comment, any further discussion by
Committee, Matt, you muted yourself.
I'm talking on mute. Thank you. Seeing no hands, I would go ahead and have us call the roll.
Okay, I will reread the motion and then I will call roll.
Oh,
The
read the
motion is
motion,
to
thank you.
recommend that the license authority focus enforcement efforts in jurisdictions that allow licensed commercial cannabis operators over jurisdictions that do not, so that licensed operators can thrive and prioritize enforcement efforts against unlicensed businesses that are selling to minors, selling contaminated products, or that cause egregious environmental harm. And with that, we have Matt Clifford,
Aye.
Kristen Nevedal,
Aye.
Helena Williams,
Aye.
David Woolsey,
Aye.
Ben Wu.
Aye.
The motion passes.
Very good. That would bring us on to item number 5 on the agenda, which is public comment on items not on the agenda. So I would go ahead and take that at this time. Oh, and I would, again, like to limit comment. In the interest of time, I would like to shorten the comment per
Ben has a
speaker.
hand raised.
Yes, please, Mr. Member Wu.
I was just wondering, I guess, how are you planning to deliver kind of this message, or how do you summarize this for the overall committee? We voted on this item, or are you going to do a preamble and kind of talk about all the things we discussed?
Can someone help me out here? Going from memory, I assume that at the full committee meeting next week, there'll be a portion where we're called upon, subcommittee chairs are called upon to kind of give a report of the subcommittee. And we will describe this motion, maybe, read the motion. And I can't honestly remember beyond that, if I will make general comments describing the discussion, or how have we done this in the past? Anyone who's able to help me out here, please do.
Yes, how it is each chair will be called on to kind of give an overview of what that subcommittee went over and read the motions to the full committee. There will be discussion per those motions, and then again, the full committee will vote on accepting those motions and then bringing them to the BCC, the licensing authorities.
And of course, the motions, our recommendations could be amended at that time based on discussion by the full committee.
Yes, exactly.
So there you have it. Does that answer your question, Member Wu?
That does. So I guess then I'm curious to hear from you how you kind of plan to walk through it. To me, if I was to, if it was up to me, right? Agenda item 2, we didn't do anything on that, and the way I saw it was, looking through it, I didn't really want to find what I consider least, more severe, most severe. The BCC already has kind of their thoughts on it, and I didn't think anyone said that, hey, we disagree with any of this, right? So we kind of left that as is. So on agenda 2, we didn't really, item 2, we didn't do anything. On item 3, we have our motion, and item 4, we have our motion. I was just wondering then, with respect to item 4, I personally would state somewhere that, hey, this is a big problem, and frankly, there's a lot of education that we felt we needed to have, in addition to, I think our proposal isn't going to fix everything, right? I think we're going to need more education on this, and I personally believe that this warrants further attention from the overall committee, in the future. But I just didn't know kind of what you expected, or what you're expected to say.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's helpful. I appreciate that. And I think I agree with what you're saying. I think on that last item, we can say, look, this is a big issue. We don't think for a minute that we understand all of it, and we think we'll have more to say on this, but some things that we know are important are contained in this motion. But we feel like there's more. Is that the idea that you're getting at?
If I could toss on one more thing, the other thing I'd like to throw in there is the request for the overall, or whether it's us or the overall committee, to go back to BCC and then request that, it'd be nice on a go-forward basis, whether it's an annual thing, to get data and reports on infractions and enforcement, and just so we have stats, so we as an organization know, maybe we're prioritizing wrong things, right? There's no way for us to fix things if we don't have the data. And so I think that to me has always been the biggest issue, is really pushing BCC or whichever entity to start tracking and sharing the data with us.
I think that's a good point as well, and thanks for reminding me of that. That was brought up earlier. So yes, that's a good point. And then finally on item number 2, I guess I agree with what I took to be your comment, which is that, in that case, we do have detailed policies like that exist already, prioritization policies from 2 agencies. And the general sense is, those are fair, as far as we know, and as far as we heard from folks, that those seem to be working fairly well in practice. And again, we may have more to say on those if we take up that topic in the future. But for now, we don't see the reason. We don't see a strong need to propose anything amending those. And so I think that makes sense. We're not writing on a blank slate the way we are with the other agenda items. So yeah, that's the difference.
I would leave it open to other members to make sure they agree too.
Yeah, if anyone wants to add anything here, please do. Okay, and then remember, Wu, I think you still have your hand up. You might want to put it down unless you have more. Great.
Thank you.
Okay. So seeing no further comment from the committee, I don't see any hands right now. I'd like to go to public comment for items not on the agenda. I do want to tighten things up a bit because we're getting late in the day, and I also feel like a minute is a bit too harsh. So I'm going to propose that we have 90 seconds of comment, a minute and a half from each speaker. Someone pipe up if you disagree, but not seeing that, I'd go ahead and open it up to public comment, agenda item number 5.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the panel, I have opened the Q&A. If you would like to make a public comment, please follow the instructions currently being displayed on your screen. All other means to communicate during this meeting will not be addressed. You will be provided a minute and a half and given a 30-second warning. With that, we do have an individual identified as Wade Laughter. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Yes, Wade Laughter with House of Harlequin. I wanted to suggest the idea, and I don't know how it would work, but that you recommend some funding be liberated to provide education, not just to the folks who are trying to get into the permitted system and get their license and all that, but also education for the consumer, so that the consumer would understand if they walk into a dispensary that's not licensed, for example, that has open jars of flower on the shelf that you can sample and smell, they would know that that's not a licensed dispensary. And what's in my experience, and I have limited exposure to public media, but there is very little information of that sort available to the average consumer. And it seems to me the state would have some kind of responsibility to help the consumer understand what they should expect in the way of packaging and the safety of their products. Yes, thank you. So yeah, again, I appreciate the service that each of you have offered to this industry and to the health and safety of all persons. That's all I have. Thank you.
Next, we have William Perno. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. I asked this enforcement committee to have a future agenda item with information on how many BCC compliance checks have been done for compliance regarding the sales and deliveries of marijuana to minors from licensed and also unlicensed businesses since recreational sales began in 2018, and report this information publicly. Just for example, in Colorado, they do that. They had in 2019, 604 compliance investigations with a 97% compliance rate. The state of California for alcoholic beverage control, as I mentioned earlier, had failures as high as 79% for vehicle deliveries of alcohol to minors. That was in June of 2020 during the pandemic. We need to know what the BCC has or has not done for compliance checks on this very important topic. And in Denver, I know that in 2015 from news media reports that they had 7 violations of underage sales from
30 seconds.
They had 7 violations of underage sales from their retail licensed marketplace out of 30 compliance checks. So that's, a pretty high number there. That was in 2015. But all of these compliance checks are to lower the any violations of that. And so again, I think that the licensed businesses welcome that. It's the unlicensed market as well. And I really hope we'll get this as a future agenda item. Thank you.
Next, we have Barbara Gordon. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Yes, thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity. I am very glad this committee is starting to address deliveries to minor issue. I know our kids are still at home. They're still in online school. They have more free time. And I think with less parental supervision, what's going on, and we know that deliveries, it's going on and it's very problematic. I think, again, like other speakers have said, I hope you will continue to address this issue because it has been ignored way too long. Thank you.
Next, we have John Brower. Your microphone has been unmuted.
I would request that the subcommittee agendize a future topic that, as definitely part of the enforcement conversation, should be the development of the regulated market. And the reason there's so many pop-up retailers and unlicensed retailers operating statewide is because the very low amount of licensed retail is insufficient to serve that market. And this is a big topic, but the spirit of Prop 64 and MRSA and Malcursa is to transition the market toward regulation. So I request that there be an agendized topic to find ways to both suppress and promote the licensed market.
30 seconds.
I think the easiest way to do that is to lab test products seized from unlicensed retailers and publicize those results, because a lot of that stuff has not passed labs and cannot pass labs. And it's really the one thing that separates the regulated market from the unregulated. Thank you.
With that, we do have another request. Sarah Armstrong, your microphone has been unmuted.
Once again, Sarah Armstrong, Director of Industry Affairs for ASA and SEC Policy Chair. The City of Los Angeles last year sponsored a bill that will allow, a bill that passed that will allow law enforcement to test samples that they have seized at unlicensed retailers and test them for toxins and poisons. The reason that you need to use a licensed cannabis lab is they're typically on top of new contaminants coming into the marketplace, which frequently show up first in illicit products. And because cannabis labs can only test other licensees' products, they needed a carve-out for law enforcement to be able to use these labs. With this mechanism, there is the last bar to being able to effectively test illicit products is
30 seconds.
Taken away, and I would urge you to put forward a agenda item that would discuss this and figure out how to best use this new tool. Thank you.
Next, we have Paul and Susan Hansbury. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hello, this is Paul Hansbury, Lovingly and Legally. I think that for future agenda items, I don't know if you have public comment for future agenda items, but perhaps you might want to consider having someone that's able to get the information, a staff member that's able to get the information. For instance, they didn't know how many peace officers were in the department. They could perhaps go find that out and get back to the committee so you wouldn't be left hanging. Additionally, I would think that the chair of the subcommittee, since you're on a fact-finding and advisory capacity, that listening to the public comment is an important aspect of that. And certain aspects of the agenda item may surface that are not specifically on the agenda. And you may be able to take action on things as they arise, because that's the entire purpose of the subcommittee is to
30 seconds.
to find out the things and the issues that need to be brought to the general committee so that they can be presented to the BCC. Thank you very much.
Next, we have an individual identified as Robert Stein. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you, Robert Stein from Cannabis Pharmacist Coalition. Just a couple of comments to echo, I think, what the other commenters were talking about during this open session. One of the things that, again, from a consumer standpoint, actually being able to look at the analysis, certificate of analysis, and basically knowing that the product has been tracked and traced from grower to dispensary is critical. And we do not have that mechanism now. Labeling is, again, extremely inconsistent. And some of them have a Q code that you can go and see a certificate of analysis. But do we really have a guarantee that that was the certificate of analysis for the product the person has in hand? And then the second thing would be, again, trying to find a way to really make it clear which dispensaries are in compliance and licensed from those that are not. Thank you.
With that, we have no additional requests for public comment. Would you like me to close this feature?
Yes, please do.
Feature's been closed.
And with that, we'll go on to our final item, which is discussion of future agenda items and possible action creating next meeting's agenda. So I'd like to throw this open for discussion by the committee. I'm hoping folks have had time to think about this, because I would really like to now this is kind of our first chance to talk together as a subcommittee about items that would be good to put on the agenda, which we were not able to do in advance of this meeting. And so I'm hoping we can really dig in here and identify some issues that we can agendize for the next meeting. Are there suggestions from the committee? Member Nevedal.
Hi there, this is Member Nevedal, and I apologize for not tracking fully, but it does seem that we discussed tabling, I think it was item 2, which was the first item that came up for us to have discussion and potentially have a recommendation. And then I also just, coupled with that, it would be helpful if we could potentially get some more statistical information. So kind of just an overview of what the most common violations are, and some more information about how many violations are being served. I think that would be pretty hugely helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe if there's a way we could get a presentation even, or just something in advance of the committee in writing, or some kind of presentation. There must be statistics in existence on enforcement, at least some aspects of enforcement. And that would be a good thing to have. Member Wu, go ahead.
I just agree. I agree with Member Nevedal. If an agenda item is, requesting a presentation or, information on enforcement compliance, I would certainly appreciate that. And my only thought, though, is, do we want to somehow help define some of that information? My fear is that we get a presentation on something that doesn't answer any of our questions, right? But maybe that's just me being the skeptic. So I would like to put on the agenda, some type of information kind of presentation on compliance and, enforcement actions.
Okay, and I'll just say from experience, the more we can brainstorm, even if we can't identify exactly what we want, the more we can brainstorm right now the kinds of questions we'd like to answer, I think the more helpful it's going to be, because, public meeting requirements, we're really limited in our ability to kind of like, we really can't talk among us ourselves other than live here. So if there are particular areas that come to folks' mind that we'd like to know more about, now or as we talk here, just feel free to call them out. Yes, Member Wu, you put your hand back up.
I think one thing I would like to learn specifically about is kind of, going forward, what is BCC or, I'll just say the agencies plans regarding, dedication of resources for enforcement and compliance, right? And knowing how many agents they're going to have, knowing by kind of geographic location, if possible, how many agents they're going to have. Those type of things will then help us get a better understanding of, what type of resource constraints we're talking about, so that when we are then advocating for the best way to attack the illicit market or something like that, at least we'll have a better understanding, right? If they're only going to have 2 agents, then hey, we know we're going to be very, very targeted on certain things, right? So it comes down to understanding what resources we're going with. So I think that will be important.
That certainly makes sense. Thanks. That's helpful. Member Nevedal, did you leave your hand up again, or did you have a more?
I did raise it again. Thank you.
Oh, good.
I think to Member Wu's point, I think that, and I could be mistaken, but I think that the Cal Cannabis model largely utilizes more of a compliance inspection approach. And it seems to me that the Bureau has more peace officers. And so I do think that we're still going to see kind of a combination of compliance and peace officer activity for both primarily for the licensed sector. And so I'm wondering if we could get some information on how they determine that. Like, are they sending folks out for a compliance inspection? Does it warrant a peace officer being part of that inspection? And some of that data would be hugely helpful. Or is there the ability to prioritize the department's peace officers for illicit activities? I think this is some of what is hard to understand. And then within that, how do they work? I think it came up with in public comment, and then also from, I think you made these comments as well, Member Clifford. Like, how do they work with other agencies, not only like the environmental agencies like Fish and Wildlife and the Water Board's WET team, but what is that interaction like with local jurisdictions? Are they available to assist local jurisdictions, their peace officers? So I would find more understanding or information around those items to be pretty helpful in trying to help kind of suss out how to prioritize some of the violations and kind of disciplinary actions internally. Just having a better understanding of what sort of resources and how they currently decide who's going out to visit these facilities. So thank you for that.
Thank you for those comments. That's helpful clarification. I think we can start to get our minds around the sort of information we're looking for. I also took note about item number 2 that we did say we would agendize. I think all 3 of the substantive items on today's agenda are things that we may want to take up again. But I just have made a note of that as well. Finally, I'll just say from my own point of view that I believe in responding to the public, and I heard a lot of interest in public comment at various times today about enforcement against sales to minors and how is that being used, and the idea of different methods there that can be used, decoys, et cetera. And so that's something that there seems to be a great deal of interest in talking about, and I think we should consider for an agenda topic. It was raised in advance of this meeting as well, and I think it's one that that we should hear more on. Anything else from the committee as far as ideas for proposals for agenda topics? Okay, seeing no hands, and I'll talk slow in case anyone changes their mind, but seeing no hands, I believe at this point we need to go to public comment on future agenda items, if I'm not mistaken. And assuming that's correct, I'm going to propose that we go to 1 minute apiece for comments. So if the moderator would please open public comment.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the panel, I have opened the Q&A. If you would like to make a public comment for future agenda items, you will be provided 1 minute. I will pause momentarily to allow individuals time to access this feature. With that, we do have an individual identified as Casey Strang. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'd like to make a suggestion that for the next subcommittee on enforcement that we see a report from the BCC on the specific strategies or their strategic plan that they may or may not have in ensuring that teens can't access marijuana. So what sorts of minor decoy operations are happening for delivery services in our state and retail storefronts, so that we can understand what's going on to ensure that marijuana is not being sold to minors. Thank you.
Next, we have William Perno. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. And to some of the committee comments on the number of violations, asking the BCC to report that. If you don't know the number of compliance operations that are being run, the violations really can't be taken in proper context. They could say we have 0 violations. Sounds great, but if they've done no compliance checks for sales to minors, then that's a problem. So we really need to know how many compliance operations are being done since recreational sales began January 1st, 2018. The ABC has an alcohol policing partnership. It's grant monies to local law enforcement. It's a force multiplier to have those officers help use the resources at the local level through state funding.
20 seconds.
And the final thing is that if we don't have enforcement of these laws that are clearly there to prevent sales to minors, they really are paper tigers. So please, as Casey Strang suggested, let's hear what's going on with the BCC. Thank you.
Next, we have Sarah Armstrong. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Once again, Sarah Armstrong. My colleagues are reminding me that there is one enforcement topic that we have not talked about today, and I would very much like it to be a future agenda item. That is the issue of burning distro licenses. It's easy to get a distribution license, start selling a mixture of legal and illegal product, and when the BCC gets onto you, you just disappear. You burn your license. I would very much like the committee to look into this. It's an area of great distress because legitimate operators don't get paid. The state doesn't get its taxes. It is the
20 seconds.
It is an emerging and getting to be a big problem. Thank you for your time.
Next, we have John Brower. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. I agree with many of the other comments, but I think another agenda item to consider would be a report, an actual physical report from the directors of the 3 licensing agencies, or whoever gets that top spot at the DCC at the next opportunity, and give them, their side of the story and what they've been doing and what they hope to do. That's what's really missing out of this enforcement conversation. It seems like something they should be willing to do. Thank you.
Next, we have Wade Laughter. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Yes, I would like to suggest that you agendize an item to recommend that the new department consolidate all of the enforcement efforts associated with cannabis within that department, including Fish and Wildlife and the Water Board and those entities, move particularly the law enforcement aspect of it to the department. And that's my suggestion. Thank you for your time and your service. I'm done.
At this time, there are no additional requests. Would you like me to close this feature?
Yes, please do.
Feature has been closed.
And with that, I want to thank the members of the public one more time for comments. We do appreciate your comments, and they're very helpful to us. And thanks for attending and for participating today. I want to thank everyone on the committee for the discussion. This was productive. Really appreciate it. And I will make a full report to the full committee next week at the full meeting. And with that, I think we're adjourned. Anything further from the committee?
No, thank you.
All right, thanks everyone. I think we're adjourned. I'm going to call us adjourned.
This is the moderator, and with the adjournment of this meeting, I will end the meeting for everybody. Thank you.